My son sent me to prison for 2 years, blaming me for a crime I did not commit to please his mistress. They think I am a broken old man coming home to die, but as the prison gates open, they do not realize one thing. I am not coming home to forgive. I am coming home to collect a debt, and the price will be their entire lives. Before I tell you how I dismantled their world in a single day, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you believe betrayal should never go unpunished. The sound of the heavy iron gate sliding shut behind me was the only goodbye I received from the Illinois State Correctional Facility. 2 years. 730 days of staring at gray concrete walls, eating slop that barely passed for food, and sleeping with one eye open. I am Raymond Bishop, 72 years old, and I walked out of that prison with nothing but a small plastic bag containing my toothbrush, a change of clothes, and a heart that had turned into a block of ice. The morning air was cold, biting at my skin, but it felt clean. It didn't smell like bleach and desperation. I adjusted the collar of my cheap jacket, the one they gave me upon release, and looked straight ahead. I did not look back at the towers or the guards. That part of my life was dead. The man who went in there, the man who believed in family and loyalty, he died in that cell. The man walking out was someone else entirely. I expected the parking lot to be empty. I had told no one of my release time, or so I thought. But there, parked right in the center of the pickup lane, was a car I knew better than the lines on my own hand. A Bentley Continental GT, jet black. The chrome grille gleamed under the morning sun like a set of bared teeth. It was my car. I had bought it cash 3 years ago after closing the biggest logistics deal of my career. It was my trophy, my reward for 40 years of hauling freight from the south side of Chicago to every corner of this country. And now, leaning against it with a smile that looked like it was painted on, was my son Andre. He was wearing a suit that I knew cost $3,000 because I was the one who paid the credit card bill for it 2 years ago. He held a bouquet of cheap gas station flowers in one hand. When he saw me, he pushed off the car and waved, his face twisting into a performance of joy. "Pop," he shouted, his voice carrying across the empty lot. "You are finally out. Welcome home." I stopped walking, my hands clenched into fists inside my pockets. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was 35 years old, but he looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. He had my eyes, but he had none of my spine. He was soft. I had made him soft. I had sheltered him from the harshness of the world, kept him away from the grit of the trucking yard, sent him to private schools, and this was my reward. A son who would sell his father for a woman who despised him. I didn't answer him. I simply adjusted my bag and kept walking, aiming for the curb where a yellow taxi was idling. Andre's smile faltered. He jogged over to intercept me, blocking my path. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. "Pop, didn't you hear me? I brought the car. I came to get you. Amber is at the house right now making a roast. We want to celebrate." The name hit me like a physical blow. Amber. The woman who had come into our lives like a wrecking ball. The woman who had thrown herself down a flight of stairs 2 years ago and pointed a shaking finger at me in a courtroom, claiming I had pushed her. Claiming I had killed her unborn child. I remembered the judge's face. I remembered Andre sitting in the witness stand, tears streaming down his face, corroborating her lies. He chose her. He chose the lie. "Celebrate," I repeated, my voice raspy from disuse. I stared at him until he looked away. "You want to celebrate the day you let your father rot in a cage?" Andre flinched. "Come on, Pop, that is in the past. We have to move forward. Amber wants to make peace. She forgives you. She forgives me." The audacity was so thick I could taste it. The woman who faked a pregnancy, faked a miscarriage, and sent an innocent man to prison forgives me. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of an engine grinding gears. I stepped around him. "Move, Andre." He scrambled to catch up, grabbing my arm. His grip was weak. Everything about him was weak. "Where are you going?" "The house is this way. You need to come home. We have your room set up. We need to sign some papers for the business, Pop. The bank needs your signature to renew the credit lines." There it was. The truth. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about a roast dinner. It was about the signature. For 2 years I had refused to see them. Every month they came to the visitation room, and every month I sent them away. They couldn't get my signature from inside the cell. They needed me out. They needed Raymond Bishop, the founder of Bishop Logistics, to sign off so they could continue to bleed my company dry. I yanked my arm away from him with a force that made him stumble back against the Bentley. The metal groaned under his weight. "I don't have a home with you," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And that house, that isn't your house. You are just a guest who has overstayed his welcome." Andre's face turned red. He straightened his jacket, his mask of the loving sun slipping to reveal the greedy boy underneath. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You are a convicted felon, Dad. Who is going to trust you? Who is going to do business with you? You need me. You need Amber. We kept the company alive while you were gone." I looked at the Bentley. I saw the scratch on the rim that hadn't been there when I left. I saw the fast food wrappers cluttering the passenger seat. They hadn't kept anything alive. They were parasites feeding on a dying host. I stepped up to the taxi driver, a man I had called from a payphone inside the prison 2 days ago. He wasn't just a random cabbie. He was an old friend from the days when we both drove trucks for pennies a mile. "Get in, Ray," the driver said, not even looking at Andre. I opened the door. Andre panicked. He realized he was losing control. He realized the signature was driving away. "Dad, stop. You can't go. Where are you going to live? You don't have access to your accounts. We froze everything for your protection. You have nothing." I paused with one foot inside the taxi. I looked back at my son one last time. The morning sun illuminated the sweat beading on his forehead. "I have my memory, Andre," I said, "and unlike you, I have my dignity." I slammed the door shut. The taxi pulled away, leaving my son standing in the dust, looking small and pathetic next to a car he couldn't afford to put gas in. As we merged onto the highway heading toward the south side of Chicago, I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of a small silver key. They had searched the house. I knew they had. They had torn up the floorboards, cut open the mattresses, and drilled into the walls looking for this key. They thought the money was in the bank accounts they could see. They thought the power was in the office downtown. They were fools. I had built my empire in the shadows, cash by cash, brick by brick. Before the trial, before the handcuffs snapped onto my wrists, I had moved the heart of my wealth into a place they would never think to look. A safety deposit box in a small community bank in a neighborhood they were too scared to drive through. Andre was right about one thing. I was a convicted felon. My reputation in the corporate world was tarnished. But Raymond Bishop didn't need a reputation. I had leverage, I had patience, and I had the one thing they lacked. I had the truth. The taxi driver, Old Man Jenkins, looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Where to, Ray?" "The usual spot." The usual spot, I confirmed. We weren't going to a mansion. We weren't going to a hotel. We were going to a small, nondescript apartment building on 43rd Street. A building I had bought under a shell company 10 years ago and never told a soul about. It was my bunker, my war room. As the city skyline rose in the distance, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Andre and Amber were probably already calling their lawyers, panic setting in. They thought the game was over because I was out. They thought they could bully a 72-year-old man into submission. They didn't know the game had just begun. The vibration of the taxi on the asphalt felt like the heartbeat of the city welcoming me back. I closed my eyes and pictured Amber's face. I pictured the way she smirked when the verdict was read. I pictured Andre holding her hand, looking at me with fake pity. "Enjoy the Bentley while you can, son," I whispered to the empty air. "Because by the time I am done with you, you won't even have a pair of shoes to walk in." The war for my life, my legacy, and my name started now, and I wasn't going to leave any survivors. The yellow taxi rattled over the potholes of 43rd Street, a rhythm I had not felt in 2 years, but knew as intimately as my own heartbeat. This was the south side of Chicago. To my son Andre, this neighborhood was a place to be avoided, a stain on his polished reputation, a place you only saw on the evening news when something went wrong. To me, it was the soil from which I grew. It was the place where I learned that a man's word is his bond, and that respect is currency more valuable than gold. The driver Jenkins didn't ask questions. He pulled up to a faded brick building that sat sandwiched between a laundromat and a bodega. The windows were barred and the graffiti on the sidewall had been painted over in a mismatch of beige tones, but the sidewalk was swept clean. Keep the meter running for a minute, Jenkins, I said, handing him a wad of cash I had withdrawn from the hidden stash in my jacket lining. I need to make sure the key still works. I walked up the steps. They were cracked concrete worn down by generations of feet. I pulled out a brass key, tarnished and heavy. 10 years ago, when the money started rolling in faster than I could count it, I felt a chill. I looked at Andre, who was 25, then driving a Porsche I had paid for, complaining that the leather seats were the wrong shade of tan. I realized then that I was raising a wolf who would one day hunger for the hand that fed him. So I bought this place. I bought it under a shell company named after my first dog, Buster. It was off the books. It was off the grid. It was my safety net. The key turned with a satisfying click. The door creaked open, revealing a hallway that smelled of lemon polish and old wood. I signaled Jenkins to leave. I was home. Not the mansion in the suburbs with the marble floors and the cold echoes, but a sanctuary where no one could find me unless I wanted to be found. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, my joints protesting the movement after 2 years of inactivity in a 6x8 cell. Apartment 3B. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was stale but clean. The furniture was simple. A leather armchair that had seen better days, a sturdy wooden table, a small kitchenette. It was dusty, but it was mine. And sitting at that wooden table looking like he hadn't moved since the day I was sentenced was Tobias. Tobias Moore, 75 years old. He wore a 3-piece suit that was probably fashionable in 1970, and a fedora rested on the table next to a glass of dark rum. He was the only lawyer in Chicago I trusted. He was the only man who knew where I was. "You look like hell," Ray Tobias said, his voice like gravel grinding in a mixer. "You should see the other guy," I replied, closing the door and locking it. "Or you will soon enough." Tobias didn't smile. He wasn't a smiling man. He pushed a thick manila folder across the table. It slid across the wood with a heavy sound, the sound of bad news. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I sat down opposite him, the leather chair groaning under my weight. "Tell me, Tobias. Tell me how bad it is." Tobias took a sip of his rum. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked me dead in the eye. "It is worse than we thought, Ray. You have been gone 730 days. And in that time, your boy Andre and that wife of his have been busy. They didn't just spend the profits, they cannibalized the beast." I opened the folder. The first page was a spreadsheet. My eyes scanned the numbers and my stomach turned. "The trucks," I whispered. "Where are the trucks?" Bishop Logistics had a fleet of 50 semi-trucks. They were my pride. I knew the VIN number of every single one. I knew the drivers by name. I knew their wives, their kids. Tobias tapped the paper with a bony finger. "Gone. Sold. 35 of them. Auctioned off for 60 cents on the dollar." I felt the blood drain from my face. 35 trucks. That wasn't just metal and rubber. That was 35 families I employed. 35 men and women who depended on me to put food on their tables. Why, I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt since the day the judge slammed his gavel. Why would he sell the assets that generate the revenue? It is suicide, because he needed liquid cash, Ray. Fast. I flipped the page, and there it was. Transfers. Massive transfers. Not to the company account, not to vendors, but to an offshore exchange I didn't recognize. Crypto. Tobias spat the word out like it was poison. He and Amber got involved with some investment guru in Miami. They promised him 1,000% return. He leveraged the trucks. He sold the inventory. He emptied the operating accounts. And I asked, though I knew the answer. And it is gone. All of it. A rug pull. The guru vanished 3 months ago. Andre has been trying to cover the hole ever since. I slammed my fist on the table. The dust motes danced in the shaft of light coming from the window. He is a fool. A greedy, lazy fool. It gets better. Tobias said, his tone dry. Or worse. The mansion. Your house, Ray. The one you built for Beatrice. I looked at him sharply. The house was paid for. I paid it off 20 years ago. Not anymore. He took out a second mortgage, a high-interest loan from a private lender. He forged your signature on the application, but he used his power of attorney to notarize it. He hasn't made a payment in 4 months. The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings. The notice was posted on the door yesterday. I leaned back, closing my eyes. My life's work. The trucks. The house where I raised my son. The house where my wife took her last breath. All of it being fed into a furnace to keep warm a woman who hated us and a son who was too stupid to see he was burning. Is there anything left? I asked, opening my eyes. Tobias leaned forward. The headquarters. The building downtown. The warehouse distribution center. That building was the heart of the operation. It was prime real estate in the logistics district. It was worth $10 million on a bad day. That is why I am here. Ray, Tobias said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Andre has a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. He has a buyer, a developer who wants to tear it down and build condos. He is selling it for $6 million, a fire sale. He needs the money to pay off the private lenders before they break his legs and to keep Amber in designer shoes. He can't sell it, I said. I am the owner. Tobias shook his head. You signed the general power of attorney before you went inside, Ray. You remember. You wanted to make sure the business could run while you were away. You trusted him. That document gives him the right to sell, lease, or mortgage any asset in your name. He thinks he is king. He thinks he has a golden ticket. I sat there, the silence of the apartment wrapping around us. I remembered signing that paper. I remembered Andre's tearful face in the visiting room, promising to take care of everything, promising to make me proud. It was all a performance, an act to get the keys to the kingdom. But then a memory surfaced. A conversation with Tobias 3 years ago over a similar glass of rum when we were drafting that very document. I remembered the look in Tobias's eye then. He hadn't trusted Andre even back then. Tobias, I said slowly, a cold smile beginning to form on my lips. Do you have the original document, not the copy Andre has? The original. Tobias reached into his briefcase and pulled out a heavy document bound in blue paper. He placed it on the table. I never travel without it. I flipped to the last page. Section 14, paragraph C. It was small print, standard boilerplate, or so it seemed. But I knew what it said. I had insisted on it more out of habit than suspicion, a remnant of my old street smarts. I read it aloud, my voice gaining strength with every word. This power of attorney shall remain in full force and effect unless the agent engages in any activity that is deemed criminally negligent, fraudulent, or grossly unethical in the management of the principal's assets. Upon the activation of this clause, the power of attorney is immediately rendered null and void, and all actions taken under its authority are subject to immediate reversal. Tobias smiled for the first time. It was a terrifying expression. The moral clause, Tobias said. We call it the nuclear option. He forgot. I said. He was so busy looking at the dollar signs, so busy looking at Amber's smile that he didn't read the fine print. He thinks he has a permanent license to steal. He does, Tobias agreed. And tomorrow morning, he is going to walk into that boardroom, shake hands with a developer, and try to sign away the last piece of your legacy. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the street below. Kids were playing basketball on the corner. Life was moving on. But for Andre Bishop, life was about to come to a screeching halt. He thinks I am a senile old ex-con, I said to the glass. He thinks I am cowering in a motel room somewhere, crying over my lost time. I turned back to Tobias. Get the paperwork ready, old friend. We are going to a meeting. Tobias poured another splash of rum into his glass and raised it in a toast. To family, he said, his voice dripping with irony. No, I corrected him, my eyes hard as flint. To business. Because that is all Andre is to me now. A bad investment that I am about to liquidate. I looked around the small, run-down apartment. It wasn't much, but it was ground zero. It was the launch pad. Tomorrow I wouldn't just be stopping a sale, I would be starting a war. And unlike my son, I knew exactly how to fight in the mud. I picked up the file containing the list of sold trucks. I ran my finger down the names of the drivers who had been let go. Johnson, Miller, Rodriguez. Good men. Loyal men. Andre didn't just betray me, I said softly. He betrayed them. He betrayed the code. And for that there is no plea bargain. There is no parole. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was ticking loudly in the quiet room. Less than 24 hours until the meeting. Less than 24 hours until I looked into my son's eyes and watched his world crumble. Rest up, Tobias, I said. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I sat back in the leather chair and closed my eyes, but sleep was the furthest thing from my mind. I was visualizing the boardroom. I was visualizing the look on Amber's face when her credit card declined. I was visualizing the look on Andre's face when he realized that the father he buried alive had just kicked open the coffin lid. The game was set. The pieces were moving. And the king was back on the board. I sat there in the dim light of the safe house, the silence heavy between Tobias and me. My eyes drifted down to my left hand, resting on the scarred wood of the table. There was a thin, jagged white line running across the back of my knuckles. It wasn't a war wound. It wasn't a mark from hauling crates in the freezing Chicago winter back in the early days. It was a souvenir from the night my life ended. The scar started to itch, a phantom sensation that dragged me backward in time, pulling me out of the dusty apartment and dropping me right back into the foyer of the mansion I had built for my wife, Beatrice. It was a Tuesday night 2 years ago, November. The wind was howling off Lake Michigan, rattling the window panes of the estate. I was alone in the study reviewing the quarterly logistics reports when the front door burst open. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The scent of cloying, overly sweet vanilla perfume announced her arrival before she even stepped into the room. Amber. She stood in the doorway, dripping wet from the rain, her blonde hair plastered to her skull. At the time, her stomach was swollen, a round bump under her soaked cashmere sweater. She looked like a drowned rat, but her eyes were burning with a fire that had nothing to do with the cold. I took off my reading glasses and set them down. I didn't offer her a towel. I didn't offer her a drink. "You are not welcome here, Amber," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I told Andre not to bring you to this house. This is Beatrice's house. It is a home for family, not for complications." She stepped further into the room, her high heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She didn't look ashamed. She looked entitled. "I am family, Raymond," she spat out. "I am carrying your grandson, and I am done waiting in the shadows. I am done living in that condo downtown while Keisha plays the grieving wife in the suburbs." Keisha was Andre's wife, his real wife, a good woman, a strong black woman who had stood by my son through his failures, who had nursed him through his bouts of depression, who had treated me with the respect a father deserves. Amber was the mistake, the secretary he had started sleeping with 6 months prior. "You are a mistake," I corrected her. "And Keisha is not playing anything. She is his wife. She is the mother of his child. You are a homewrecker who forgot to take her birth control." Amber's face twisted. She walked up to the desk, placing both hands on the mahogany surface, leaning in until I could smell the gin on her breath. "He wants to leave her, Ray. He told me. He loves me. But he is afraid of you. He is afraid you will cut him off." She was right about that. I had told Andre explicitly that if he left Keisha for this woman, not only would I cut him off, I would remove him from the company entirely. I had standards. I had a code. You don't abandon loyalty for a pretty face. "He should be afraid," I said, standing up. I towered over her. "Go home, Amber. Sober up, and tell my son that if he wants to see me, he can come alone." "I am not going anywhere," she screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. "You are going to call him, right now. You are going to tell him that you give us your blessing. You are going to tell him to serve Keisha the divorce papers tonight, or so help me God, I will make sure you never see this baby." I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Do you think I care about your threats?" I asked. "That child is innocent, but you are poison. I built this empire on respect. I won't let you tear it down with your greed. Get out of my house." I walked around the desk and grabbed her arm. Not roughly, just firmly. I guided her toward the hallway. She struggled, clawing at my hand, her nails digging into my skin. That was where the scar came from. Her nails tearing into my flesh as I tried to remove a trespasser from my home. We reached the top of the grand staircase. The marble steps cascaded down to the foyer below, gleaming under the chandelier. "Let go of me, you old bastard," she shrieked. I released her arm immediately. She stumbled back a step, smoothing her sweater over her belly, her chest heaving. "You will regret this, Raymond," she hissed. "You think you are untouchable because you have money? You are just an arrogant old man. Andre belongs to me. This house belongs to me. It is my turn." I pointed down the stairs. "Out. Now." And then the front door opened. Andre walked in, shaking a wet umbrella. He looked up, his face, pale eyes widening as he saw his mistress and his father standing at the top of the stairs. "Amber, Dad, what is going on?" The moment Amber saw him, her expression changed. The rage vanished, replaced instantly by a look of terrified fragility. It was a transformation so sudden, so complete, it was like watching a snake shed its skin in real time. She looked at Andre, then she looked at me, and then she smiled. It was a small, wicked smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Help me, Andre," she screamed, and then she threw herself backward. She didn't trip. She didn't slip. She launched herself. I watched in frozen horror as she flung her arms out and let gravity take her. It was a performance, a calculated, deadly performance. "No," I shouted, reaching out to grab her, but my hand only grasped empty air. She tumbled down the stairs. It was a brutal sound. Thud, crack, thud. She rolled and bounced her body limp until she landed in a heap at the bottom, right at Andre's feet. Silence filled the house for one heartbeat. Then the screaming started. Amber curled into a ball, clutching her stomach. "My baby, he killed my baby. He pushed me. Oh God, Andre, he pushed me." Andre looked up at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of shock and horror. "Dad," he whispered. I stood at the top of the stairs, my hand still outstretched, the blood dripping from the scratches on my knuckles. "I didn't touch her, son," I said, my voice trembling with the sheer insanity of what I had just witnessed. She jumped. She threw herself. "You liar!" Amber wailed, writhing on the floor. "He said I was a mistake. He said he would kill it before he let it inherit a dime." Andre fell to his knees beside her, cradling her head. He looked at her tears, her theatrical agony, and then he looked back at me. And in that moment, I saw the choice he made. He didn't choose the truth. He didn't choose the father who had raised him, loved him, and built a world for him. He chose the drama. He chose the victim. "You pushed her," Andre said, his voice hardening. "I saw you, Dad. I saw your hand out." I stared at him. The betrayal hit me harder than any physical blow could have. He was lying. He hadn't seen me push her because I hadn't pushed her. But he was rewriting history in real time to save himself, to be the hero for this woman. I called the police. Amber screamed. "They are coming." I didn't move. I stood there like a statue as the sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder and louder. I watched my son hold the woman who had just tried to frame me for murder. The months that followed were a blur of legal meetings and court dates. I was charged with aggravated assault and endangerment of an unborn child. The press had a field day. Logistics tycoon attacks pregnant mistress of son. They painted me as a violent, controlling patriarch who couldn't handle losing control of his family. But the real dagger came in the lawyer's office. My defense attorney, a sharp man named Cohen, sat me down 2 weeks before the trial. He looked tired. "Ray, we have a problem," Cohen said. "I didn't do it," I repeated for the 1,000th time. "I believe you," Cohen said, "but the jury won't." Why, I demanded. "I have built this city. I have a clean record." Cohen sighed and leaned across the desk. He lowered his voice, speaking the ugly truth that nobody wanted to say out loud, but everyone knew. "Ray, look in the mirror. You are a 70-year-old black man. You are big. You are powerful. You have a deep voice. And the victim. She is a petite, blonde, pregnant white woman who cries on command. She is going to sit on that stand, clutching a tissue, talking about how terrifying you were. And then your son is going to get up there and corroborate her story." He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. "It is a he said, she said, Ray. But in this country with that visual, you don't win that fight. If we go to trial and Andre testifies that he saw you push her, you are looking at 10 to 15 years. You will die in prison." I sat there feeling the walls closing in. The system wasn't built for me. It never had been. I had just been rich enough to ignore it for a while. "So what do?" I asked, my voice hollow. "They are offering a plea," Cohen said. 2 years, minimum security. You plead no contest to reckless endangerment. I have to admit to something I didn't do. You have to survive, Ray. Take the 2 years, keep the company, live to fight another day. So I took it. I stood in front of a judge and swallowed my pride. I accepted the label of a criminal to save the last years of my life. I looked down at the scar on my hand again, back in the present-day safe house. The memory faded, leaving behind only the cold rage. I didn't touch her. I whispered to the empty room. Tobias poured another drink. "I know, Ray, but they made a mistake." "What mistake?" "They forgot that prison doesn't just hold people. It teaches them. They put you in a cage thinking it would break you. But all it did was give you time to think, time to remember, and time to plan. I clenched my fist, the scar stretching white against my dark skin. Amber faked that fall, I said. And Andre knew it. He knew it the moment he looked in my eyes, but he took the easy way out. And now, Tobias said, sliding a new document across the table. We have the proof. I looked at the paper. It was a medical file. It wasn't from the night of the fall. It was dated 2 weeks prior to the incident. What is this? Tobias smiled, a shark sensing blood. I did some digging while you were away. Amber's medical history. It was sealed, but I know a guy. I opened the file. My eyes scanned the medical jargon until they landed on a summary paragraph at the bottom. Patient presented with abdominal pain. Ultrasound confirms no fetal heartbeat. Spontaneous abortion complete. D&C performed. I froze. I read it again. The date was clear. 2 weeks before she came to my house. 2 weeks before she threw herself down the stairs. She wasn't pregnant, I whispered. No, Tobias said. She had lost the baby 2 weeks earlier. She was walking around with a padded stomach. She came to your house that night knowing there was no baby to hurt. She staged the fall not to save her child, but to blame you for a miscarriage that had already happened. The realization washed over me like ice water. It wasn't just a lie. It was a monstrous, calculated frame job. She used the death of her own unborn child, if there ever really was one, as a weapon to take me out. She is evil, I said. And Andre Tobias asked, I thought about my son. Did he know? Did he know she wasn't pregnant that night? Or was he just another pawn in her game? It doesn't matter, I said, closing the file. He testified. He put me in that cell. He is just as guilty. I stood up the chair, scraping loudly against the floor. The scar on my hand throbbed, but now it felt like a reminder of purpose, not just pain. We have the leverage, Tobias said. We can go to the police. We can exonerate you. No, I said. Not yet. Police take too long. Courts are too slow. I don't want an apology, Tobias. I want them to feel it. I want them to feel the ground crumble beneath their feet just like I did. I put the medical file into my jacket pocket right next to the key to the safety deposit box. Tomorrow morning, I said, we go to the meeting. We stop the sale. And then we go to the party. What party? Andre is throwing a welcome home party for himself, I said, my voice dripping with venom, celebrating his ownership of the company. I think it is time the real owner showed up to blow out the candles. The past was a wound, but the future was a weapon. And I was finally ready to pull the trigger. The taxi idled at the bottom of the driveway, the headlights cutting through the darkness to illuminate the wrought iron gates of the estate I had purchased 20 years ago. It was a symbol of my rise from the streets of Chicago to the boardroom, a sanctuary I had built for my wife Beatrice. But tonight it looked like a carnival. Music was thumping from the house, a heavy bass line that vibrated the windows. Expensive cars lined the circular driveway. Porsches, Mercedes, a few Teslas. It was a parade of excess. My son was celebrating. He was celebrating the sale of my company, the liquidation of my life's work, and he was doing it in my house while he thought I was rotting in a motel room somewhere, too ashamed to show my face. Keep the meter running, Jenkins, I said. This won't take long. I walked up the driveway. The gravel crunched under my boots, a sound that used to signal my arrival home after a long week on the road. Now it sounded like the approach of a storm. I could see shadows dancing in the windows. I could hear laughter. It was a party for vultures feeding on the carcass of a lion they thought was dead. I reached the massive oak front doors. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key. They had changed the locks, of course. Andre was incompetent, but he wasn't completely stupid. But he had forgotten one thing. The service entrance around the side, the one that led into the mudroom where I used to kick off my work boots. That lock was old, stubborn, and had a trick to it that only I knew. I walked around the side of the house, slipping into the shadows. The music was louder here. I jiggled the handle, applied pressure to the bottom left corner of the door, and turned my old key. The lock clicked. I was in. I stepped into the mudroom. It smelled of expensive perfume and marijuana smoke. I walked through the kitchen. It was a disaster zone. Caterers were running back and forth with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Empty champagne bottles littered the granite countertops Beatrice had picked out herself. None of the staff recognized me. To them, I was just an old black man in a cheap jacket, perhaps a janitor or a lost delivery driver. I pushed open the swinging doors and stepped into the grand foyer. The noise hit me first, a wall of chatter and laughter, then the sight. My home was filled with strangers, people I didn't know, people who didn't know me drinking my liquor and standing on my Persian rugs. And there, in the center of it all, holding a crystal flute of champagne, was Amber. She was wearing a silver dress that cost more than my first truck. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting on the arm of a man I recognized as a local real estate developer. She looked radiant. She looked triumphant. She looked nothing like a woman who had lost a child 2 years ago. I stood there for a moment just watching. I was a ghost at my own wake. Then someone noticed me. The chatter died down in ripples spreading outward from the foyer until the entire room fell silent. Even the DJ, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, cut the music. Amber turned around. Her eyes widened. The glass in her hand trembled, spilling a little champagne onto the floor. For a split second, I saw the terror. I saw the realization that the monster she had locked away had broken loose. But Amber was a professional. She was an actress who had missed her calling in Hollywood. She blinked and the terror vanished, replaced by a mask of overwhelming, tearful joy. "Dad," she gasped loud enough for the back of the room to hear. She set her glass down and rushed toward me, her arms open. The crowd watched captivated. To them, this was a touching reunion. The prodigal father returning to the embrace of his loving family. "Oh, Dad, I am so glad you came," she cried, reaching for me. "We were so worried when you left the prison today. We thought you were angry." I stood like a statue. I didn't raise my arms. I didn't smile. I just looked at her. She stopped inches from me, her hands hovering in the air, unsure of what to do with my lack of response. She lowered her voice to a stage whisper, playing the role of the peacemaker. "Please, Ray. Everyone is watching. Don't make a scene. We just want to love you. Andre is so sorry. We are all sorry. Can't you forgive us? Can't we be a family again?" Forgiveness. It was a word she used like a weapon. She wanted me to absolve her so she could sleep at night, so she could keep spending my money without the nagging guilt of what she had done. I looked over her shoulder and saw Andre. He was standing on the staircase looking down at us. He looked pale. He looked sick. He knew me better than she did. He knew that I didn't come to parties unless I had something to say. I stepped around Amber as if she were a piece of furniture. I walked into the living room, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. I walked up to the main table, which was laden with an ice sculpture and trays of oysters. Ray Amber followed me, her voice rising in pitch. "Ray, talk to me. What are you doing?" I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. The crowd held its breath. Were they expecting a gun? A knife? No. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. I turned to face the room. I saw the faces of business partners who had abandoned me. I saw friends who hadn't written a single letter in 2 years. And I saw my son who was slowly descending the stairs, his legs shaking. "I thought we should share some memories," I said, my voice booming in the silent room, "since we are celebrating." I opened the envelope. I didn't hand the photos to anyone. I threw them. I tossed them into the air like confetti. They fluttered down, landing on the buffet table on the floor, on the ice sculpture. Dozens of high-resolution glossy photographs. The guests leaned in to look. What they saw wasn't a grieving mother. They saw Amber. Amber sitting at a bar called the Velvet Lounge. Amber holding a martini in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Amber laughing with a group of men. Amber dancing on a table. The timestamp on the photos was clearly visible in the bottom right corner. November 14th, 2021. 2 days after she allegedly threw herself down my stairs. 2 days after she claimed to have lost my grandson. Murmurs started to ripple through the room. People were picking up the photos, whispering, pointing. "Isn't that the week of the accident?" someone whispered. "She looks pretty happy for someone who just had a miscarriage," another voice said. Amber froze. She looked at a photo that had landed near her feet, her face drained of all color. She looked up at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The pictures were screaming for me. Andre reached the bottom of the stairs. He snatched a photo from a guest's hand. He looked at it. He looked at Amber. "What is this?" he whispered. Amber grabbed his arm. "They are fake, Andre. He doctored them. He is trying to ruin me. You know he hates me." But Andre wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the timestamp. He knew where she said she was that night. She had told him she was in the hospital recovering. She had told him she couldn't bear to see anyone. "You told me you were in bed," Andre said, his voice trembling. "You told me you were in pain?" I stepped forward. "She wasn't in pain, Andre," I said coldly. "She was celebrating, just like you are tonight. She was celebrating because she had successfully framed your father. She was celebrating because she wasn't pregnant and she never lost a baby." Liar, Amber screamed, launching herself at me. She clawed at my face, her nails seeking my eyes. "Get out! Get out of my house! You are a monster!" I caught her wrists, easily. I held her there for a second, letting her feel the strength she thought I had lost. Then I pushed her back. Not hard, just enough to create distance. "Your house?" I asked. Andre stepped between us, trying to regain some shred of control over the situation. He was sweating profusely. "Dad, stop it. You are making a scene. You are drunk. You want to destroy this family. You want to tear this house down around us." I looked at my son. I looked at the chandelier above his head. I looked at the cracks in the plaster that they had tried to cover up with cheap paint. "Tear it down?" I asked softly. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a photo. It was a legal document. It was red, a notice of default. I unfolded it and held it up for the room to see. "I don't need to tear it down, son. The bank is doing that for me." Andre stared at the paper. "What is that?" This I said. My voice echoing off the walls is a foreclosure notice. It says that the second mortgage you took out on this property, the one you forged my signature for, the one you haven't paid in 4 months, is in default. I dropped the paper onto the floor, right on top of the photos of his partying wife. "The sheriff is coming tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to change the locks, Andre. This isn't your house. It isn't my house anymore either. It belongs to the bank." The room erupted. The guests began to move toward the door, realizing the party was over. The smell of disaster was thicker than the smell of the roast Amber had lied about cooking. "You are lying," Andre shouted, his voice cracking. "We have money. We sold the trucks. We have the crypto investment." I laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Check your phone. Andre, check the crypto account. It is gone. It was a scam. And the trucks, you sold them for pennies and you spent that money keeping this charade alive." I leaned in close to him, so close I could see the dilated pupils of his eyes. "You are broke, son. You are homeless. And you are married to a woman who lied about the only thing that ever made you a man, being a father." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the door. Behind me I heard Amber sobbing, not the fake tears of earlier, but the real terrified tears of a woman who sees the walls closing in. I heard Andre shouting at her, asking about the photos. I heard the guests scrambling to leave, not wanting to be associated with the ruin of the Bishop family. I walked out into the cool night air. Jenkins was waiting. "Drive," I said as I got into the back seat. "Where to?" "To the office," I said. "I have a meeting in the morning, and I need to make sure my chair is ready." As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at the mansion one last time. The lights were still on, but the party was dead. I had lit the fuse. Now all I had to do was watch it burn. The elevator ride to the 30th floor of the Bishop Logistics Tower was the longest ride of my life, not because it was slow, but because every floor number that ticked by on the digital display represented a layer of history I had built and my son was trying to sell. I smoothed the front of my suit. It wasn't the cheap prison-issue jacket anymore. Tobias had brought me one of my old bespoke suits from storage. It smelled of cedar and authority. I stepped out into the lobby. It was quiet, too quiet. Half the cubicles were empty. The reception desk, usually manned by old Mrs. Higgins, was empty. Andre had cut the staff to the bone to save money, bleeding the life out of the company to feed his wife's appetite for luxury. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a graveyard. I walked toward the double-glass doors of the boardroom. The blinds were drawn, but I could hear voices inside. One was high-pitched, frantic. Andre. The other was calm, deep-measured. That would be Mr. Vance, the developer. Or rather, the man Tobias had hired to play the part of the developer. I didn't enter yet. I stood by the door listening. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear my son try to sign away my legacy. "Come on, Vance," Andre was saying, the desperation leaking out of his voice like oil from a cracked engine. "The price is a steal. $6 million. You can tear it down, build condos, turn it into a parking lot for all I care. Just sign the check. I need the wire transfer to hit by noon." Noon. That was when the foreclosure on the mansion became final. He was trying to use the company's heart to save his own skin. I pushed the door open. The heavy glass swung inward with a silent swoosh. Andre jumped as if a gunshot had gone off. He was standing at the head of the long mahogany table, my table hovering over a stack of documents. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot from the party the night before, his skin sallow. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. When he saw me, his jaw dropped. For a second, he looked like a deer in headlights. Then the arrogance kicked in, the defense mechanism of a weak man. "Security," Andre shouted, looking around the empty room. "How did you get in here? Get out! We are in the middle of a private meeting." I didn't say a word. I walked past him, my footsteps heavy on the plush carpet. I walked past Mr. Vance, who gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. I walked straight to the head of the table. Andre was blocking the chairman's chair, my chair. "Move," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command, the kind of command you give a dog that has jumped onto the furniture. Andre laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You are insane. You are a convicted felon, Dad. You don't have a place here anymore. You don't have a chair. I am the CEO. I am the acting director. And I am selling this building." He turned to Vance, a manic grin plastered on his face. "I apologize for this interruption, Mr. Vance. My father is... he is having a hard time adjusting to life on the outside. Please ignore him. Let's sign." Andre grabbed the pen and thrust it toward Vance. Mr. Vance didn't take the pen. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and looked at Andre with a mixture of pity and boredom. "I don't think I will be signing anything today," Andre Vance said. Andre froze. The pen hovered in the air. "What?" "We had a deal. 6 million. Cash. You said you wanted the land." "I did," Vance said smoothly. "But I make it a policy not to buy stolen goods." "Stolen!" Andre sputtered. "This isn't stolen. I have the deed right here. I have the power of attorney. I have the right to sell." Vance stood up. He buttoned his jacket slowly. "Actually, you don't. I was just keeping you occupied until the real owner arrived." Vance nodded to me, picked up his briefcase, and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone with my son in the boardroom that felt suddenly very small. Andre stared at the closed door, then turned his wild eyes on me. You ruined it," he hissed. "You sabotaged the deal. Do you know what you just did? The bank is going to take the house. They are going to take everything." I sat down in the chairman's chair. It creaked familiarly, welcoming me back. I rested my hands on the table and looked at my son. "The bank is taking the house because you didn't pay the mortgage, Andre. And this building, you never had the right to sell it." Andre slammed his hand onto the table. "I have the power of attorney," he screamed, reaching into his briefcase and pulling out a crumpled, coffee-stained document. "I signed it for you right here, general power of attorney. It says I can sell, lease, or liquidate any asset in the name of Raymond Bishop." He waved the paper in my face like a weapon. I looked at the paper. I didn't flinch. Read the expiration clause. "Andre." He blinked. "What read?" "The expiration clause." He flipped the pages frantically, his hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. He scanned the legal jargon, his eyes darting back and forth. It is valid until revoked," he stammered. "Keep reading," I said calmly. "Subsection 4, paragraph B." He found it. I watched his lips move as he read the words I had instructed Tobias to insert years ago, a safeguard against exactly this moment. "This power of attorney shall remain valid during the period of the principal's incarceration. Upon the official release of the principal from state custody, this document is immediately rendered null and void." The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. You set me up," he whispered. "I didn't set you up," I said. "I protected myself. You were so eager to get your hands on the wheel, you didn't bother to check if the engine was running. I was released yesterday morning, Andre, at 8:00 a.m. That document became trash the moment I stepped onto the pavement." Andre slumped into a chair. He looked defeated, but then a spark of his mother's stubbornness, or maybe just pure desperation, flared in his eyes. "It doesn't matter," he said, his voice gaining a sudden nasty edge. "Okay, so you are back. So the power of attorney is gone, but you are still a felon, Dad." The bylaws of the company. I checked them. A person convicted of a felony involving moral turpitude cannot serve as the chairman of the board. You can't run this company. You can't stop me from voting you out. I control the board now. I replaced them all with my friends. He leaned forward, a sneer twisting his face. I will call a vote today. I will fire you from your own company, and then I will sell the building anyway. You built this place, old man, but you handed me the bricks to wall you out. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was a deep rumbling laugh that came from my belly. It echoed off the glass walls. Andre looked confused. Why are you laughing? I am going to destroy you. I stopped laughing and leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. You can't sell this building, Andre. Not because of the power of attorney. Not because of the board. You can't sell it because Bishop Logistics doesn't own it. Andre frowned. What are you talking about? Of course we own it. It is the headquarters. It is on the books. It is leased, I said. Leased from who? I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out a single pristine document. It was bound in blue leather. It looked old. It looked important. I slid it across the table. Open it. Andre opened the folder. He stared at the first page. The Beatrice Trust, he read aloud. Beatrice, his mother, my wife, the woman who had died of cancer 10 years ago, heartbroken that she wouldn't see her son grow up to be a man. I bought this building 15 years ago, I said, my voice softening just a fraction at the mention of her name. But I didn't put it in the company's name. I put it in a trust, an irrevocable trust. Andre looked up, his eyes wet with confusion and fear. I don't understand. The beneficiary of the trust is not Bishop Logistics, I explained, and it isn't you. The beneficiary is the Bishop Family Charity Fund, and the sole trustee is me. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city I had conquered. I did it to protect the asset from lawsuits, I said. In this business you get sued. It happens. But I also did it because I knew deep down that one day I might need a fortress that no one could breach, not even my own son. I turned back to him. This building belongs to your mother's memory, Andre. Bishop Logistics is just a tenant on a month-to-month lease. And as of this morning, as the trustee of the Beatrice Trust, I am serving you an eviction notice. Andre couldn't breathe. He was gasping, pulling at his collar. The walls were closing in on him. The $6 million he needed to save his life had just vanished into thin air. You can't evict the company, he wheezed. Where will we go? I don't know, I said coldly. But you have 48 hours to clear your desk. And Andre. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. Don't take the stapler. I bought that too. I picked up the phone on the conference table and dialed security. This is Raymond Bishop, I said. Please escort the former CEO out of the building. And make sure he doesn't touch the computers. We have a forensic audit starting in 1 hour. Andre stood up shaking. He looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes anymore. Just hatred and fear. You planned this, he spat. You let me think I was in charge. You let me dig this hole. No, son, I said, sitting back down in my chair. You dug the hole yourself. I just took away the ladder. The security guards arrived a moment later. They were men I had hired years ago, men Andre had treated like dirt. They didn't be gentle. As they dragged him out of the boardroom screaming and cursing, I didn't look away. I watched him go. I was alone in the boardroom. I looked at the empty chair where he had sat. I looked at the view of the skyline. I had won the battle. I had saved the building. But as I touched the cold wood of the table, I realized the war was far from over. Andre was broken, but Amber was still out there, and she was the one who had started the fire. I pulled out my phone and dialed Tobias. It is done, I said. He is out. Now freeze the accounts. All of them, Tobias asked. Every single dime, I said. Amber's going to try to go shopping to make herself feel better. Let's make sure she can't even buy a stick of gum. I hung up the phone. The silence returned to the room, but this time it wasn't the silence of a graveyard. It was the silence of a clean slate. I took a deep breath. It was time to go to work. While I was sitting in the dusty apartment on 43rd Street watching the digital numbers on my laptop screen, Amber was standing in the middle of a marble-floored boutique on the Magnificent Mile. I didn't need to be there to see it. I knew her habits better than she knew herself. When Amber felt threatened, when she felt the walls closing in, she didn't seek comfort in family or prayer. She sought comfort in consumption. She tried to buy her way out of insecurity. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from the bank. Transaction attempted Hermes of Chicago. Amount $14,500. Status declined. I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee Tobias had brewed and smiled. It was a cold, humorless curving of the lips. She wasn't buying groceries. She wasn't buying diapers for a baby she never had. She was trying to buy a handbag, a Birkin. She was trying to wrap herself in leather and gold hardware to prove to herself that she was still the Queen of Chicago, even as her castle was being foreclosed upon. I could picture the scene perfectly. Amber would be standing at the counter, tapping her manicured fingernails on the glass, looking at the sales clerk with that mix of boredom and arrogance she had perfected. She would be wearing sunglasses indoors. She would be waiting for the receipt, already mentally planning the Instagram post she would make with the orange box. Then the silence. The awkward stretching silence that happens when the machine beeps a low, flat tone instead of the cheerful chirp of approval. I watched the screen as another notification popped up. Transaction attempted Hermes of Chicago. Amount $14,500. Status declined. She was trying again. She probably told the clerk it was a chip error. She probably laughed a high tinkling sound and rubbed the card on her expensive blouse as if a smudge of dust was the reason my empire was rejecting her. "Try it one more time, Amber," I whispered to the screen. Third notification. Declined. Now the panic would be setting in. Not the fear of poverty, not yet. The fear of embarrassment. The fear of the sales clerk's judgment. In Amber's world, the judgment of a retail worker was a fate worse than death. She would be digging through her purse, pulling out the backup cards. The Platinum American Express. The Visa Black Card. The cards Andre had issued to her as an authorized user on the corporate accounts. Buzz. Transaction attempted. Declined. Buzz. Transaction attempted. Declined. It was a symphony of rejection. I imagined her storming out of the store, leaving the bag on the counter, her face burning red behind her oversized sunglasses. She would be walking fast, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement, snatching her phone from her purse. She wouldn't call the bank. She wouldn't have the patience for hold music. She would call the man she blamed for everything. Across town, Andre was sitting in his car in the parking lot of the building he had just been thrown out of. He was staring at the steering wheel, trying to comprehend the magnitude of his failure. When his phone rang and he saw Amber's name, he probably thought she was calling to comfort him. He probably thought she was calling to offer support. He answered. I wish I could have tapped the line, but I didn't need to. I knew the script. "Andre, what is going on with the card?" she would be screaming, not even saying hello. "I am at Hermes. The black card was declined. The platinum was declined. Even the debit card is not working. Did you forget to pay the bill? You told me you handled the bills." Andre would be confused. He would pull the phone away from his ear, wincing at the volume. "What? No, the bills are paid on autopay. It must be a mistake. Fix it. Andre, fix it. Now I have people looking at me. I look like a pauper." Andre, shaking, would open his banking app. He would try to log into the joint accounts, the business accounts, the personal savings. He would use Face ID, his hands trembling too much to type the passcode. The app would load. The little spinning wheel would turn, and then the numbers would appear. But they wouldn't be the numbers he was used to. He was used to seeing 6 figures. He was used to seeing a cushion that I had provided. Instead, he saw zeros. Checking $0, savings $0, investment $0. Bishop Logistics operating access denied. And right across the top of the screen in bold red letters, a banner notification that would stop his heart. Account status frozen. Code 99 forensic audit in progress. Andre would stare at the screen blinking, thinking it was a glitch. He would refresh the page. 0, 0, 0. He didn't understand. He thought he knew the system. He thought he knew the rules. But he had forgotten the most important rule of all. The man who builds the castle keeps the master key. When I set up the family trust and the corporate accounts 20 years ago, I included a clause. It was a failsafe, a dead man's switch. It was designed for a scenario where I might be kidnapped or incapacitated, but it also applied to incarceration. The clause stated that upon the reemergence of the primary account holder after a period of absence exceeding 6 months, a mandatory automatic freeze would be placed on all associated assets. This freeze was to facilitate a complete forensic audit to ensure no funds had been misappropriated during the absence. It was a standard security measure for high net worth individuals. Or at least that is what I told Andre when I explained the trust to him years ago. He hadn't listened then. He had been too busy playing video games on his phone. But he was listening now. The silence of those zeros was deafening. "Andre, are you there?" Amber would be shrieking in his ear. "Answer me, Amber," he would whisper, his voice cracking. "The money. It is gone." "What do you mean gone?" It says frozen. It says audit. Dad, he did it. He froze everything." The realization would hit Amber like a physical slap. She was standing on the street corner surrounded by shoppers carrying bags of things they could afford, and she had nothing. Her plastic was useless. Her status was revoked. "You told me he was powerless," she would scream, not caring who heard her. "You told me he was a senile old man. You said the prison broke him. You said we had control. I thought we did." Andre would stammer. "I thought the power of attorney. You thought you are useless. Andre, you let him walk in there and take everything. Do something. Call the bank. Scream at them. Fix this." "I can't. Amber, it is a forensic audit. If I call them, they will ask questions. They will ask about the crypto transfers. They will ask about the trucks. If they audit the books, they will see what we did. They will see the embezzlement." There was a pause on the line, a heavy, terrifying pause as Amber processed what he was saying. The freeze wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a trap. If they tried to fight it, if they tried to unlock the money, they would have to explain where the missing millions went. They would have to open the books that they had been cooking for 2 years. "So, we are broke?" Amber asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous low hiss. We have cash in the safe at the house," Andre said, grasping at straws. "We have the jewelry. We can sell the watches." "The house." Amber laughed, a manic, hysterical sound. "The house the bank is taking tomorrow. That house. And the jewelry. You think I am going to pawn my engagement ring to buy groceries. You think I am going to live like a peasant because you couldn't handle one old man. Amber, please calm down. Come pick me up. We will figure this out. Pick you up. Why? So we can drive nowhere in a car we can't afford to put gas in." I listened to the silence in the room with Tobias. I didn't need to hear the rest of the conversation to know that the cracks in their marriage were turning into canyons. Amber didn't marry Andre for his wit. She didn't marry him for his looks. She married the Bishop name. She married the credit limit. Without the money, Andre was just a man who had betrayed his father, and Amber had no use for men who weren't useful. Back on Michigan Avenue, Amber lowered the phone. She looked at her reflection in the shop window. She saw the expensive dress, the perfect hair, the face that had launched 1,000 lies. And she saw a woman who was about to lose it all. She didn't go pick up Andre. I watched another notification pop up on my laptop. This one wasn't from the bank. It was from the GPS tracker I had installed on the Bentley months before I went to prison. A habit from the logistics business: always know where your assets are. The Bentley wasn't moving toward Andre's location. It was moving north, toward the Gold Coast, toward the high-end jewelry district. She wasn't going to save her husband. She was going to try to liquidate what she could before the repo men found the car. She was going to try to sell the diamond watch I had given Andre for his graduation. She was going to strip the carcass clean before she abandoned it. I looked at Tobias. "She is running," I said. Tobias nodded. "Rats always jump first when the water rises. Let her run," I said. "She won't get far. The jeweler she is heading to, I saved his business from bankruptcy in '98. He knows the watch. He knows it belongs to the Bishop estate. When she walks in there and tries to sell it without papers, he is going to make a call, not to the police, to me." I closed the laptop. The first domino had fallen. The money was gone. The unity was shattered. Now they were just two desperate people turning on each other in the dark. Andre was sitting in a parking lot staring at a phone that showed him 0. Amber was driving a stolen car to fence stolen goods, and I was sitting in a warm room drinking coffee, preparing for the next step. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. Her voice was guarded, tired, wary. "Hello, Keisha," I said. "It's Ray." There was a long silence on the other end. "Ray, is that you? I heard you were—" "I am out, Keisha, and I have some work to do. But first I have a check for you, and a file. I think it is time you got back what was taken from you." The silence on the line broke, replaced by the sound of a sharp intake of breath. "I am listening, Ray." I smiled. The money was frozen for Andre and Amber. but for the people who deserved it. The vault was wide open. It was time to bring in the reinforcements. It was time to show Andre that while he was playing house with his mistress, I had been keeping score. And the score was about to be settled. The taxi pulled up to a small weathered duplex on the far side of the south side, miles away from the manicured lawns of my former estate. The paint was peeling a dull gray that matched the overcast sky, and a tricycle with a missing wheel lay overturned on the patchy grass. This was where my daughter-in-law lived. Not the woman who had thrown a party in my stolen house, but the woman my son had thrown away like yesterday's trash. Keisha. I told Jenkins to wait. I adjusted my coat, feeling the weight of the envelope in my pocket. It was heavier than the one I had thrown at the party. That one contained shame. This one contained justice. I knocked on the door. It took a long time for it to open. When it finally did, I saw a face that had aged 10 years in the 2 I had been away. Keisha was 32, but the lines around her eyes and the weary slump of her shoulders told a story of sleepless nights and double shifts. She was wearing a faded nursing scrub top, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked at me through the screen door, her eyes widening not with joy, but with suspicion. "Ray," she whispered. "Hello, Keisha," I said softly. "May I come in?" She hesitated. I didn't blame her. The last time she saw a bishop man, he was handing her eviction papers and telling her that her marriage was a lie. "I am not him, Keisha," I said, reading her mind, "and I am not here to take anything else from you." She unlocked the screen door. It creaked, a mournful sound. I stepped into a living room that was small, cluttered, but fiercely clean. There were photos of my grandson Malik on the walls. He was 7 now. I hadn't seen him since he was 5. "Where is the boy?" I asked. "School," Keisha said, crossing her arms defensively. "He asks about you." I told him you were working far away. I didn't have the heart to tell him his grandfather was in prison, and his father was... Well, you know what his father is. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thank you for protecting him." "Why are you here, Ray?" she asked, cutting to the chase. "I heard you got out. I heard about the scene at the house last night. People talk." I sat down on a worn fabric sofa. It smelled of laundry detergent and poverty. "I am here because I owe you an apology, Keisha." She laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "An apology, Ray? Your son left me with nothing. He cleaned out the joint accounts. He kicked me out of the house we were buying. He left me with debt I didn't create. And where were you? You were building your empire. You let him do it." "I didn't let him," I corrected gently. "I was blind. I thought he was a good man who made a mistake. I didn't realize he was a monster until he turned on me too. But you are right. I should have protected you. I was the patriarch. It was my job to look after the family, and I failed you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thin blue checkbook. I placed it on the coffee table. "That is why I am here. To fix it." Keisha looked at the checkbook, but she didn't touch it. "Money doesn't fix everything, Ray. It doesn't give Malik his dad back. It doesn't give me the years I wasted supporting Andre while he was playing house with that woman." "No," I said. "It doesn't. But it pays the rent. It buys groceries. It puts Malik in a better school. And it gives you the breathing room to do what needs to be done next." I wrote a check. I made it out for $50,000. It wasn't a fortune, not compared to what I used to have, but for Keisha right now, it was a lifeline. I tore it out and slid it across the table. "This is just the beginning," I said. "A down payment on my debt to you." Keisha looked at the numbers. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. She held it like it was fragile, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ray, this is... I can pay off the car. I can... Take it," I said. "But I have something else for you. Something more valuable than money." I pulled out the thick manila envelope. This was the weapon. "What is this?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "This," I said, my voice hardening, "is proof." I opened the file. Inside were bank statements, credit card receipts, and transfer logs dating back 3 years. "When Andre divorced you," I explained, "he claimed he was broke. He claimed the business was struggling. He claimed there were no marital assets to split. The judge believed him because he hid everything." Keisha nodded, her face darkening. "He said the trucks needed repairs. He said the market was down. He lied," I said. "Look at the dates, Keisha." I pointed to a series of highlighted transactions. 6 months before he filed for divorce, he started siphoning money from your joint savings. He didn't spend it on repairs. He transferred it to a shell account in the Cayman Islands, an account listed under the name Amber Holdings. Keisha gasped. She grabbed the paper, reading the line items. 50,000, 20,000, 10,000. He stole over $300,000 of marital assets, I said. Money that belonged to you, money that belonged to Malik. He used it to buy Amber that condo downtown. He used it to buy her jewelry. He funded his affair with your savings. Keisha's hands shook with rage. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold fury that matched my own. He told me we had nothing, she whispered. He told me I was greedy for asking for alimony. He committed perjury, Keisha. He lied under oath during the divorce proceedings. And this file proves it. I leaned forward, looking into the eyes of the woman who should have been the mother of the Bishop dynasty. Tobias has already drafted the motion, I said. We are going to reopen the divorce settlement. We are going to sue him for fraud, dissipation of assets, and perjury. We aren't just going to ask for what you are owed. We are going to ask for punitive damages. We are going to ask for everything he has left. Keisha looked up from the papers. But he doesn't have anything left, does he? You froze the accounts. I smiled. He doesn't have cash, but he has liability. And Amber. She has assets. That jewelry she is trying to sell. That car she is driving. If we can prove it was bought with stolen marital funds, the court can seize it. We can strip her naked, Keisha. We can take the clothes off her back. Keisha stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the gray street. She was silent for a long moment. When she turned back, she looked different. Taller, stronger. He destroyed my life, Ray, she said. He made me feel small. He made me feel like I wasn't enough. He made us all feel that way. I agreed. But today we stop feeling. Today we start fighting. She walked back to the table and picked up the file. She held it to her chest like a shield. I want to sue him, she said firmly. I want to sue her. I want them to stand in front of a judge and admit what they did. They will, I promised. Tobias will represent you, pro bono. You won't pay a dime. Keisha looked at the check in her hand, then at the file. She took a deep breath. Can I see Malik? I asked the question, hanging in the air, heavy with hope. Keisha smiled, a real, genuine smile this time. He gets out of school at 3. You can come with me to pick him up. He missed his pop-pop. I felt a crack in the ice around my heart. For 2 years I had been surviving on hate. But the thought of seeing my grandson, of seeing the one pure thing in this mess, gave me something else. A reason to build, not just destroy. We have work to do first, I said, standing up. Tobias is waiting for your signature on the affidavit. Once you sign that, the court-martials will be looking for Andre. Not for a foreclosure. For a felony fraud indictment. Keisha grabbed her purse. She didn't look like a tired nurse anymore. She looked like a woman on a mission. Let's go, she said. I have been waiting 2 years to wipe that smirk off Amber's face. We walked out of the duplex together. The sky was still gray, but the air felt different. It felt charged. Andre thought he was fighting a lonely old man. He didn't know he was fighting a war on 2 fronts. He had the bank on one side taking his house, and now he had his ex-wife coming for his throat, armed with the receipts of his betrayal. As we got into the taxi, I pulled out my phone. I sent a text to Tobias. The second front is open. File the motion. I looked at Keisha. She was staring out the window, her jaw set. She was ready. Andre had made a lot of mistakes, but his biggest one wasn't stealing the money. It was underestimating the women he had wronged. He thought Keisha was weak. He thought Amber was loyal. He was about to find out that a woman's scorn is a fire that burns hotter than hell itself. And I was the one pouring the gasoline. The safe house on 43rd Street had become my command center, a place of dust and strategy where Tobias and I dismantled my son's life piece by piece. But the document Tobias placed on the table that rainy Tuesday morning was different. It wasn't a bank statement. It wasn't a foreclosure notice. It was a medical file, thick and stamped with the red ink of an insurance fraud investigation unit. Tobias sat back, lighting a cigar that filled the small room with acrid smoke. He looked like a cat that had not only caught the canary but had already digested it. We got lucky, Ray Tobias said, his voice raspy. Or rather, Amber got greedy. That is usually how they fall. I picked up the file. My hands, usually steady as a rock, felt a slight tremor. This was the Holy Grail. This was the answer to the question that had haunted me for 730 nights in a concrete cell. What is this, I asked. It is the insurance claim, Tobias explained. After the incident, after she claimed you pushed her down the stairs, Amber filed a claim against your homeowner's insurance policy. She wanted $50,000 for medical expenses and emotional trauma related to the miscarriage. I scoffed. Of course she did. She couldn't just send me to prison, she had to get paid for it too. But here's the thing about insurance companies, Ray Tobias continued, blowing a smoke ring toward the ceiling. They don't like paying out unless they have to, especially when the claimant has a history of frivolous lawsuits. They flagged her file, they did a deep dive, and because it was a fraud investigation, HIPAA privacy laws have certain loopholes. I opened the folder. The first page was a summary from a private medical investigator. I read the words, but my brain refused to process them at first. It was too monstrous, too calculated. Subject Amber Bishop, incident date November 12, 2021. Finding fraudulent claim. I looked up at Tobias. Fraudulent, keep reading Ray. Page 4. The nurse's testimony. I flipped to page 4. It was a sworn affidavit from a woman named Sarah Jenkins, a former nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, the same hospital where Amber had been taken that night. The same hospital where Andre had sat in the waiting room crying into his hands while I was being handcuffed by the police. I read the nurse's statement. I, Sarah Jenkins, admit to falsifying medical records for Amber Bishop in exchange for a cash payment of $5,000. The patient arrived with no physical injuries consistent with a fall. An ultrasound was performed upon arrival. The uterus was empty. There was no fetus. There was no heartbeat. There was no evidence of a recent pregnancy. I stopped reading. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. She wasn't pregnant, I whispered. No, Tobias said softly. I looked back at the page. The patient provided a sample of blood that was later determined to be theatrical stage blood mixed with animal plasma, the report continued. I was instructed to chart it as a spontaneous abortion induced by trauma. I disposed of the fake biological evidence and entered false vitals into the system. I slammed the file shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She bought a nurse, I said, my voice rising. She bought a nurse for $5,000 to fake a death. She faked a life first. Ray Tobias corrected me. She was never pregnant. The belly bump padding, the morning sickness, acting. She played you. She played Andre. And when she needed a climax to her little play, she threw herself down the stairs because she knew there was no baby to hurt. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the gray Chicago skyline. I felt sick, physically ill. I had spent 2 years in a cage surrounded by murderers and thieves, thinking that I had accidentally killed my own grandchild. Even though I knew I hadn't pushed her, I had carried the guilt that maybe, just maybe, my argument had caused her stress. Maybe I was responsible. But there was no baby. There never was. It was just a pawn in her game to get a ring on her finger and my name on a prison roster. I want her arrested, I said, turning back to Tobias. I want this file to go to the district attorney, today. Tobias reached for the file, but I pulled it back. A new thought was forming in my mind. A darker thought. If we go to the police now, I said slowly, Amber goes to jail. She becomes the villain. Isn't that what you want? No, I said. That is too easy. If she goes to jail, Andre will play the victim. He will say she fooled him too. He will cry to the cameras and say he was just a heartbroken father who was manipulated by a sociopath. He will try to crawl back to me. He will try to salvage his reputation. I looked at the file again. I don't want Andre to be a victim, Tobias. I want him to be an accomplice. Or better yet, I want him to be the instrument of his own destruction. I sat back down and pulled a plain manila envelope from the drawer. I didn't put the whole file in. Just the nurse's affidavit, and the ultrasound report showing the empty womb. No return address, no note, just the cold, hard medical facts. Where is Andre staying? I asked. The Starlight Motel on the edge of town, Tobias replied. The bank took the keys to the mansion this morning. He and Amber are sharing a room with 2 double beds and a view of the dumpster. I sealed the envelope. Send this to him, I said. Courier, anonymous. Make sure he gets it when Amber isn't there. You want him to know, Tobias asked. I want him to doubt, I said. I imagined the scene. Andre sitting in a cheap motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes, his life in ruins. He had lost his father. He had lost his company. He had lost his home. The only thing he had left, the only thing he was clinging to was his wife and the shared tragedy of their lost child. It was the glue holding their toxic marriage together. The narrative that it was them against the world, them against the cruel father who killed their baby. And I was about to dissolve that glue. 2 hours later, a courier on a motorbike pulled up to the Starlight Motel. He knocked on room 104. Andre opened the door. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn to the disastrous party, now wrinkled and stained. He looked like a man who was waiting for the end of the world. He took the envelope. He probably thought it was another legal notice, another lawsuit from Keisha, another demand from the bank. He sat on the edge of the sagging bed and tore it open. I wasn't there, but I could see it. I could see his eyes scanning the page. Sarah Jenkins. He would remember the name. She was the nurse who had held his hand. She was the nurse who had told him, "I am so sorry for your loss." He would read the words, "theatrical blood." He would read "empty uterus." And in that moment, the seed would be planted, a seed of pure black poison. He would look at the bathroom door where Amber was probably applying makeup she could no longer afford, getting ready to go out and find a new mark. He would look at her stomach, the stomach he had kissed, the stomach he had talked to, and he would realize that he hadn't been protecting his family. He had been protecting a lie. He wouldn't scream. Not yet. Andre was a coward. He would sit there, the paper trembling in his hands, and he would replay every moment of the last 2 years. Every time Amber refused to let him go to the doctor with her. Every time she turned away when she was changing. Every time she smiled when she thought he wasn't looking. He would realize that he had sent his father to prison for a bag of corn syrup and red dye. I sat in my chair in the safe house feeling a deep, dark satisfaction. Sending Amber to jail would be justice. But making Andre realize that he destroyed his own life for a woman who was laughing at him the whole time. That was torture. And the best part was, he couldn't confront her. Not right away. Because if he admitted he knew, he would have to admit he was a fool. He would have to admit that his father was innocent. And Andre Bishop would rather burn in hell than admit I was right. So he would stew, he would watch her, he would look for the cracks. And when the pressure became too much, he wouldn't just leave her. He would explode. The phone rang. It was the courier confirming delivery. "Package received," the voice said. Subject looked disturbed. "Good," I said. I hung up and looked at Tobias. "Phase 2 is complete," I said. "The rat is in the cage and he just realized the cheese is poisoned." Tobias chuckled, a dry sound like leaves scraping pavement. "You are a cruel man, Ray." I touched the scar on my hand again. "I learned from the best," I said. The sun was setting over Chicago, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere in a cheap motel, my son was looking at his wife and seeing a stranger. The foundation of their lies had cracked. Now all I had to do was wait for the whole house to come crashing down. While my son sat in a motel room staring at a medical report that shattered his reality, his wife was busy trying to construct a new one. Amber Bishop did not know how to work a job. She did not know how to save money. But she knew how to work a camera. She knew how to weaponize tears. I sat in the safe house on 43rd Street watching her on my laptop screen. She had set up her ring light in the corner of the motel room, carefully angling the camera to show just enough of the peeling wallpaper to look sympathetic, but not enough to look pathetic. She was live on social media. Her channel Amber's Journey had 50,000 followers. Most of them were strangers who bought into her curated life of luxury, the life I had unknowingly paid for. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, wiping away a tear that looked suspiciously practiced. "I know I haven't posted in a while. It has been a nightmare." I watched the viewer count tick up. 1,000, 2,000. "People love a car crash. My father-in-law," she continued, her voice trembling. "He got out of prison yesterday. We tried to welcome him home. We tried to be a family, but he is not the same. He is violent. He came to our house and threw us out. He froze our bank accounts. We are on the street, guys. I am pregnant again, and we don't even have money for food." She was lying. She wasn't pregnant. We knew that. But the internet didn't know. The comments began to roll in a waterfall of heart emojis and angry faces. "That is monster. Stay strong, Amber. Drop the Cash App link, Queen." And she did. She pinned a donation link to the top of the chat. "He is a bitter old man," she sobbed. "He hates me because I am white. He hates me because I love his son. He wants to destroy us. Please, if you can help, anything helps. We just want to be safe." I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Tobias. "Are you ready, Ray?" he asked. I closed the laptop. I didn't feel anger watching her. I felt the cold precision of a surgeon about to cut out a tumor. "I am ready," I said. We left the apartment and got into Jenkins's taxi. We weren't going to the police station. We weren't going to a courtroom. We were going to the south side to a small brick building that housed the studio of the Chicago Pulse. It was the most popular podcast in the city for our community. The host, a man named Darius King, was a voice of truth in a city full of noise. He didn't traffic in gossip. He trafficked in facts. And I had brought him a mountain of them. When I walked into the studio, Darius stood up. He was a big man with a deep voice and eyes that had seen everything. "Mr. Bishop," Darius said, shaking my hand, "I remember your trucks. You gave my uncle a job when nobody else would hire him back in the 90s. I remember your uncle," I said. "Good man, hard worker. Sit down," Ray Darius said, gesturing to the microphone. "The world is listening to her. It is time they listened to you." The on-air light turned red. I put on the headphones. I heard Amber's voice still playing in the background of the producer's booth, her shrill pleas for money filling the airwaves. Darius leaned into the mic. "Welcome back to the Chicago Pulse. Today we have a special guest, a man who built a logistics empire from the ground up, a man who has been silent for 2 years while his name was dragged through the mud. Raymond Bishop is in the building, and he brought receipts." Ray Darius turned to me. "Your daughter-in-law is online right now calling you a monster. She says you left them destitute. She says you are abusing your power. What do you have to say to that?" I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who had negotiated million-dollar contracts while men like Andre were still learning to tie their shoes. "I say that poverty is a temporary condition, Darius, but character is permanent." Amber says I cut them off. That is true. But she forgot to tell your listeners why. Why, Darius asked. "Because in the 2 years I sat in a prison cell for a crime I did not commit, my son and his wife spent $3.2 million. Darius whistled. $3 million. On what? The business. No, I said. I pulled out the spreadsheet Tobias had prepared. I didn't look at the camera. I looked at Darius. They spent $400,000 on luxury vacations to Dubai and Paris. They spent $200,000 on designer clothing. They spent $150,000 on a lease for a Bentley that my son crashed and repaired off the books. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. But that is just money, Darius. A man can make more money. What I cannot forgive is where they took it from. I slid a second document across the desk. Bishop Logistics had a charitable arm, the Beatrice Fund, named after my late wife. It was designed to provide scholarships for kids in this neighborhood, kids who wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it. Darius looked at the document. His face hardened. They drained it, I said. They liquidated the scholarship fund, $500,000 meant for books and tuition for black children in Chicago. They took it all. And Amber used it to buy a diamond necklace she tried to pawn yesterday. The studio was silent. The producer in the booth looked shocked. She is online right now asking for donations for food, I continued. But the necklace she is wearing in that video, it cost $40,000, and it was paid for by the future of 10 students from this community. Darius looked into the camera that was streaming our interview live. You hear that, Chicago? You are sending money to a woman who stole from your children. But Ray Darius said, playing devil's advocate, she says you hate her. She says you framed her. She says she is a victim of a toxic family dynamic. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a USB drive. I expected she would say that. That is why I brought this. What is this? Darius asked. This, I said, is a video recorded by a private investigator 6 months ago. It was taken at a brunch spot downtown. Amber didn't know she was being filmed. She thought she was safe with her friends. Play it, Darius commanded. The producer plugged in the drive. The video feed on the podcast switched. On the screen, grainy but clear, sat Amber. She was holding a mimosa. She was laughing. She looked nothing like the tearful victim in the motel room. I can't believe it worked, the Amber on the screen said, taking a sip of her drink. The old dinosaur actually went to jail. 2 years. Can you believe it? Her friend off camera laughed. And Andre, He is okay with it. Andre does what I tell him to do, Amber scoffed. He is terrified of his daddy, but he is more terrified of me leaving him. I told him if he didn't back up my story about the stairs, I would take everything. Now we have the house. We have the company, and the old man is rotting in a cell. It was the easiest payday of my life. The video ended. Silence. Absolute silence in the studio. Then Darius spoke. His voice was low, vibrating with anger. The easiest payday of her life. I looked into the camera. Amber, I know you are watching. I know you have your phone in one hand and your other hand in the pockets of strangers. You called me a monster. But monsters don't build schools. Monsters don't build businesses. Monsters steal from the innocent and laugh about it over champagne. I leaned back. You wanted attention, Amber. You wanted to be a star. Well, now you are. The reaction was instantaneous. We watched the metrics on the producer's screen. The viewers on Amber's live stream weren't donating anymore. They were attacking. You stole from a scholarship fund. You framed him. Liar. Give the money back. The comments moved so fast they became a blur of rage. People were requesting refunds on Cash App. People were tagging the brands she worked with. And then the phone calls started coming in. Not to me. To her. I watched on my laptop as Amber's eyes darted to her notification screen. Her face went pale. She stopped crying. The act dropped. What she whispered looking at her phone, it was her agency. The boutique fashion brands she promoted. The makeup companies that sent her free products, they were dropping her. Real-time cancellations. No brand wants to be associated with a woman who steals from charity and frames an innocent black man. She started panic blocking people. She started screaming at the chat. It is out of context that video is fake. He is using AI, but nobody was buying it. The truth has a sound, and it rings different than a lie. The sound of her voice on that recording, arrogant, cruel, dismissive, that was the real Amber, and everyone knew it. She ended the stream abruptly. The screen went black. I took off the headphones. Thank you, Darius, I said. Darius stood up and hugged me. It wasn't a business hug. It was a hug of solidarity. You cleared your name, Ray. But what about your son? I looked at the blank screen where Amber's face had been. My son is currently sitting in a room with a woman who just lost her income, her reputation, and her mask. He has the medical file I sent him. He knows she lied about the baby. And now, he knows she thinks he is a fool she can control. I buttoned my jacket. I don't need to do anything to my son Darius. I just locked him in a cage with a tiger that hasn't eaten in days. Nature will take its course. I walked out of the studio into the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jenkins, my driver. Sheriff just pulled up to the motel. Looks like they are serving the eviction notice on the mansion too. Where to next? I typed back one word. Home. Not the mansion, the apartment. I needed to rest. Because tomorrow I wasn't just fighting for my reputation. I was taking back those bricks and mortar. The bank had the house, but I had the deed to the land it sat on. Another little detail Andre had missed. As the car drove away, I checked social media one last time. The hashtag #JusticeForRay was trending in Chicago. Amber's account had been set to private. She thought she could use the internet to destroy me. She forgot that the internet is a mirror. If you are ugly on the inside, eventually it shows. And Andre. He was alone with her now. No money, no fans, no lies left to hide behind. Just the cold, hard truth of what he had married. It was going to be a long night at the Starlight Motel. The morning sun did not bring warmth to the sprawling estate that sat at the end of the long, winding driveway. It only served to illuminate the neglect. The lawn, once manicured to the millimeter, was overgrown. The fountain, which I had installed for Beatrice because she loved the sound of falling water, was dry and filled with dead leaves. It was a visual representation of my son's stewardship. He had taken a palace and turned it into a tomb. I sat in the passenger seat of a black SUV, but this time I wasn't in a taxi. Next to me was Jim Reynolds. Sheriff Reynolds to everyone else in the county, but just Jim to me. We had played high school football together 50 years ago on fields that were more dirt than grass. I had gone into trucking, and he had gone into law enforcement. We both knew the cost of building something from nothing. Are you sure about this? Ray Jim asked, his hands resting heavily on the steering wheel. Once we serve this, there is no going back. He will be on the street. I looked at the house. I saw the curtain twitch in the upstairs window. Andre was watching. He was always watching, waiting for the world to come save him. I am sure, Jim, I said, my voice devoid of hesitation. He had 2 years to pay a mortgage. He had 2 years to maintain this property. Instead, he treated it like a piggy bank he could smash open whenever he wanted a new toy. Jim nodded. He put the car in park and adjusted his hat. All right then, let us do this by the book. We stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under our feet, a sound that announced Judgment Day. We walked up the stone steps to the massive double doors. I didn't reach for my keys this time. This wasn't a break-in. This was an eviction. Jim rang the bell. It echoed deep inside the house. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then I heard the heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding back. The door cracked open. Andre stood there. He looked worse than he had at the office. He was wearing a bathrobe over sweatpants, his feet bare. He hadn't shaved in days. The arrogance that usually armored him was cracked, revealing the panicked child underneath. But when he saw me standing next to the sheriff, he tried to summon one last burst of bravado. He pushed the door open, but planted his body in the frame, blocking the entrance. "You can't be here," he spat, his eyes darting between me and the sheriff. "This is harassment. I called my lawyer. He said you can't come onto the property without a warrant." Jim stepped forward, his face impassive. "I don't need a warrant, son. I have a court order." Jim handed him the papers. They were thick stapled documents with the seal of the county court stamped in blue ink on the front. Andre didn't take them. He let them fall to the porch floor. "I am not touching that," Andre said, his voice rising in pitch. "This is my house. My name is on the mail. I have lived here for 2 years. I have squatter's rights. I have tenant rights. You can't just throw me out." I stepped up, standing shoulder to shoulder with Jim. I looked at my son, and for the first time I didn't see the boy I raised. I saw a stranger who was trying to steal from me. "You don't have rights, Andre," I said calmly. "You have delusions. This is my house," Andre screamed, his voice cracking. He slammed his hand against the doorframe. "Dad, tell him you gave it to me. You told me to look after it. I looked after it," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call this?" I gestured to the dry fountain. I pointed to the peeling paint on the window frames. "You didn't look after it. You occupied it. You lived here like a king while I was eating slop in a cage. But you forgot one thing, Andre. Kings pay their armies. You didn't pay the bank." Andre lied, his eyes wild. "I made payments." "Amber handled the accounts, Amber," I said, saying her name like a curse. "Amber handled the accounts the same way she handled the truth. She spent it." I picked up the papers from the floor and shoved them into his chest. He instinctively grabbed them, read the header. "Andre." He looked down. His eyes scanned the document. I saw the moment the air left his lungs. "Sold," he whispered. "It says..." "Sold." "That is right," I said. "The bank foreclosed yesterday at 5:00 p.m. But they didn't put it on the market. They didn't have to. Because a buyer stepped in this morning at 9:00 a.m. and paid the full balance in cash, plus penalties, plus interest." Andre looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You bought it back. You saved it." "Oh, thank God, Dad. I knew you wouldn't let them take it. I knew you were just trying to scare me." I laughed. It was a dark, dry sound that startled the birds in the trees. "I didn't buy it back for you, Andre. I didn't buy it back for me." "Then who owns my house?" I stepped closer, invading his personal space, forcing him to step back into the foyer. "The Beatrice Bishop. Shelter for women and children," I said. Andre blinked. "What?" "I donated the funds," I explained. "I bought the deed through the charity I set up in your mother's name. This house. This mansion you used to throw parties for your fake friends. It is going to be a shelter for women who have actually been abused, women who actually lost children, women who need a home unlike you who just wanted a palace." The color drained from his face. "You gave my house to a homeless shelter. It was never your house," I roared, my patience finally snapping. The sound of my voice echoed off the high ceilings. "I bought every brick of this place. I paid for every shingle on the roof. I stood on this land when it was dirt and dreamed of building a legacy. And you are just a guest. A guest who hasn't paid rent in 2 years. a guest who forged his host's signature to take out loans, a guest who disrespected the memory of the woman this house was built for. Andre backed away, stumbling over the edge of the rug. "Dad, please. You can't do this. Where will we go, Amber? She can't live on the street." "She is delicate." "Delicate," I scoffed. "The woman who faked a miscarriage is delicate. The woman who stole from a scholarship fund is delicate." I looked at my watch. It was a heavy gold timepiece, one of the few things I had retrieved from the safety deposit box. "It is 10:00 a.m., Andre. The moving trucks for the shelter arrive at noon. They are going to start setting up bunk beds in the living room." I looked at Jim. "Sheriff, what is the standard eviction protocol for a hostile squatter?" Jim adjusted his belt, his hand resting near his badge. "Usually we give them 24 hours, Ray. But since the new owner is a charitable organization and the property was acquired via emergency foreclosure, I can authorize an immediate vacate order." I turned back to Andre. "You heard the man. Immediate." Andre looked around the foyer, his eyes landing on the grand staircase where Amber had staged her fall. He looked at the crystal chandelier. He looked at the life he thought he was entitled to. "I need time to pack," he pleaded. "We have clothes. We have furniture." "I don't want your furniture," I said. "It smells like betrayal." I held up one finger. "I am giving you 1 hour, Andre. 1 hour, not 61 minutes. 60 minutes. I pointed to the door. "You take what you can carry. You take your clothes. You take your personal effects. But anything bought with company money, it stays. Anything bought with the second mortgage, it stays. That belongs to the trust now." Andre stood there paralyzed. "1 hour," I shouted. He flinched and turned to run up the stairs. "And Andre," I called after him. He stopped his hand on the banister, looking down at me with terrified eyes. "Don't forget the trash," I said, my voice dropping to a low, lethal register. He looked confused. "What trash?" I pointed up the stairs toward the master bedroom where I knew she was hiding, where I knew she was listening. "Your wife," I said. "Get your trash out of my house. All of it." Andre stared at me for a second, the insult landing like a physical blow. Then he turned and ran up the stairs, shouting for Amber. I walked into the living room and sat down on a chair that was covered in a plastic sheet. The movers hadn't arrived yet, but the house already felt different. It didn't feel like mine anymore. And that was okay. It felt clean. Jim stood by the door, watching the stairs. "You are a hard man," Jim said quietly. I looked at the portrait of Beatrice hanging over the fireplace. Her eyes seemed to be smiling at me. "I tried being soft, Jim," I said. "I tried being a father who gave second chances. And look where it got me, 2 years in a cell." I listened to the sounds of chaos upstairs. I heard suitcases being dragged across the floor. I heard Amber screaming, her voice muffled by the walls but still piercing. I heard things breaking. Let them break it, I thought. The charity can fix drywall, but they can't fix a broken soul. I checked my watch again. 55 minutes left. When that hour was up, I was going to lock the doors, and I was going to stand on the porch and watch them walk down that long driveway, carrying their bags, walking away from the paradise they had poisoned. They thought the bottom was when the credit card declined. They thought the bottom was the live stream. They were wrong. The bottom is when you realize that the roof over your head wasn't a right. It was a privilege, and privileges can be revoked. I sat back and waited. The clock ticked. The war was almost over. But the final battle, the one where they walked out the door and faced the world with nothing but the clothes on their backs, that was going to be the victory parade. The neon sign of the Last Stop Inn flickered outside their window, casting a rhythmic, sickly red glow across the cheap, synthetic bedspread. I wasn't in the room with them, but I didn't need to be. I knew the smell of that room. It smelled of stale tobacco, industrial cleaner, and the sour reek of a life-hitting rock bottom. My son Andre and his wife Amber had gone from a 10,000-square-foot mansion to a 300-square-foot box in the span of an afternoon. The walls of those places are thin. I imagine the neighbors heard every word. They didn't hear a loving couple comforting each other in times of hardship. They heard the sound of 2 rats trapped in a bucket turning on each other to survive. Amber was no longer the crying, fragile victim she played for the cameras. That performance had ended the moment the sheriff locked the gates of the estate behind them. In the privacy of that cramped room, stripped of her designer clothes and her audience, the real Amber emerged. She was a creature of pure venom. She paced the small space between the bed and the dresser, kicking Andre's suitcase out of her way. You are pathetic, she screamed, her voice shrill enough to peel the paint. You sat there and let him take the house. You let him humiliate me in front of the whole city. Andre was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He was still wearing the same clothes from the eviction, now rumpled and sweaty. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. I couldn't stop him, Amber, he mumbled into his palms. He owns the deed. He owns the trust. I told you. You told me you had power, she yelled, grabbing a plastic cup from the nightstand and throwing it at him. It bounced harmlessly off his shoulder, but the insult landed. You told me the old man was finished. You said he was a senile ghost, but he walked in there and played you like a fiddle. She stopped pacing and leaned in close to him, her face twisted into a sneer. Look at you. You are not a man. You are a little boy waiting for Daddy to give him an allowance. You are a useless, spineless parasite. Andre looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. He had the medical file I sent him tucked into his bag, the knowledge that she had faked the pregnancy burning a hole in his mind. But he hadn't said it yet. He was too beaten down. I gave you everything, he whispered. I stole for you. I went against my father for you. I perjured myself in court for you. And look where it got us, she shrieked, gesturing around the dingy room. We are in a dumpster, Andre, because you are too stupid to read a contract, because you are too weak to fight back. She laughed a cruel, mocking sound. I should have known. I should have known when I met you. You walk like him, you talk like him, but you have none of his fire. Ray is a monster, but at least he is a man. You are just a shadow, a weak, pathetic shadow who needs his mommy to protect him. That struck a nerve. Andre flinched. Don't talk about my mother, he warned, his voice low. Oh, I will talk about her, Amber said, sensing blood. She pressed her advantage, looking for the softest spot to stick the knife. Beatrice. Saint Beatrice. That is all I ever heard about. How wonderful she was, how perfect she was. She stepped closer, invading his personal space. You know what I think? I think she was just as weak as you. She raised a failure, Andre. She coddled you. She made you soft. She died, leaving her fortune to a husband who didn't even put her name on the building until it suited him. She was a doormat, and she raised a doormat. Andre stood up. His hands were shaking at his sides. Shut up, Amber. Or what she taunted, tilting her chin up. What are you going to do, Andre? Cry run to your mommy's trust fund? Oh wait, you can't. Because even from the grave she chose your father over you. She knew you couldn't handle the legacy. She knew you were a loser. The snap was audible. It wasn't a sound in the room. It was the sound of something breaking inside my son. The years of manipulation, the lies about the baby, the theft, the shame, and now the desecration of the only person who had ever loved him, purely his mother. It all boiled over in a split second of blind, white-hot rage. Andre swung his hand. The slap echoed like a pistol shot in the small room. It caught Amber square across the cheek. The force of it knocked her back onto the bed. She gasped, her hand flying to her face, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment there was absolute silence, save for the hum of the air conditioner and Andre's ragged breathing. He looked at his hand as if it didn't belong to him. He had never hit a woman in his life. I had raised him better than that, but he had never been pushed this far before. Don't you ever, he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and horror, speak her name again. You aren't fit to whisper it. She was a queen. You are just a liar who faked a pregnancy to trap a mark. The secret was out. He had played his card. Amber stared at him from the bed. The red mark on her cheek was blooming, angry and bright. Most women would have cried. Most women would have been terrified. But Amber Bishop wasn't most women. She was a survivor, a cockroach that could survive a nuclear blast. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found a new weakness. You hit me, she said softly. I know what you did, Andre stammered, backing away. I got the medical file. I know there was no baby. I know you played me. Amber sat up. She smoothed her hair. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She simply shifted gears. The victim mask was gone. The loving wife mask was gone. Now there was only the blackmailer. So, you know, she said, shrugging. So what? You going to tell the police? You going to tell your daddy? I might, Andre said, trying to find his courage. I might tell them everything. Amber laughed. She stood up and walked over to her purse. She pulled out a cigarette and lit it, blowing smoke into his face. Go ahead, Andre. Tell them I lied. But while you are sharing secrets, maybe I should share a few of my own. She took a drag, her eyes gleaming with malice, like the tax returns for the last 2 years. Andre froze. The color that had returned to his face drained away instantly. What are you talking about? I am talking about the cash, Andre. The cash you skimmed from the company operations while Ray was in jail. The cash you didn't declare to the IRS because you wanted to buy me nice things. She stepped closer, poking him in the chest with a manicured finger. I kept the ledgers, honey. I have photos of the second set of books. I have recordings of you talking about how to hide the income from the government. Andre backed up until he hit the wall. He was trapped. You wouldn't. You spent that money too. I did, she agreed cheerfully. But I'm just a wife who trusted her husband to handle the finances. I didn't sign the tax forms, Andre. You did. You are the CEO. You are the one who committed federal tax evasion. She leaned in close, whispering in his ear like a lover sharing a secret. If I go down for fraud, you go down for tax evasion. And let me tell you, the IRS is a lot less forgiving than your father. You are looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison, and unlike Ray, you won't survive it. You are too pretty. Andre slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. He was defeated. He had played checkers while she was playing three-dimensional chess. He had thought he was a partner in crime, but he was just the fall guy. So here is what is going to happen, Amber said, standing over him. You are going to fix this. You are going to go to your father. You are going to beg. You are going to cry. You are going to do whatever it takes to get him to unlock those accounts. I can't, Andre sobbed. He hates me. I don't care, she screamed, her patience snapping. Make something up. Tell him I am sick. Tell him I left you. I don't care what lie you use, just get the money. Because if you don't, Andre, I will walk into the FBI field office tomorrow morning and hand them the ledgers. I will trade your freedom for my immunity. Do you understand me? Andre looked up at the woman he had married. He looked at the woman he had sent his father to prison for. He didn't see a wife. He didn't see a partner. He saw a monster in human skin. He realized then in the dirty light of the motel room that he hadn't just lost his inheritance. He had lost his soul. He had traded his family, his legacy, and his honor for a woman who would sell him for a pack of cigarettes if the price was right. I understand, he whispered. Good, Amber said. She walked back to the bed and lay down, turning her back to him. Now turn off the light. I need my beauty sleep. We have a big day of begging tomorrow. Andre sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the vending machine outside. He was alone. Truly, completely alone. He had burned the bridge back to me, and the bridge he was standing on was made of dynamite. He looked at his hands. The hands that had signed the false testimony. The hands that had struck his wife. He hated them. He realized he had only one card left to play. One desperate Hail Mary pass that might save him from prison, even if it couldn't save him from shame. He had to come to me. Not to beg for money as Amber wanted, but to beg for mercy. And to do that, he would have to offer me something I wanted more than his suffering. He would have to offer me her. In the darkness of the motel room, the seed of a new betrayal was planted. Amber thought she had him cornered. She thought fear would make him obedient. But she forgot that a cornered animal bites. Andre closed his eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, he didn't pray for money. He prayed for a way out, and he knew that the only way out led through the door of a dusty apartment on 43rd Street. He would come to me in the morning, and he would bring secrets that even I didn't know. The alliance of the damned had finally cracked, and through the fissure, I could see the path to my total victory. The rain in Chicago has a way of washing away the dirt on the sidewalks while making the grime on a man's soul feel permanent. I sat by the window of the apartment on 43rd Street watching the water streak down the glass. I was drinking black coffee, bitter and hot, just the way I liked it. It was 8:00 a.m. I knew he was coming. I had left enough breadcrumbs for a desperate man to follow. When you strip a man of his pride, his money, and his home, he eventually remembers where he came from. He remembers the one hand that used to pick him up when he scraped his knees. A knock came at the door. It wasn't the confident rap of a businessman or the polite knock of a neighbor. It was a weak, hesitant thud, the sound of a hand that didn't want to make contact but had no other choice. I didn't get up. I shouted for him to enter. The door was unlocked. I wanted him to walk into my territory without me opening the gate for him. The door creaked open. Andre stood there. He was soaking wet. He wasn't wearing a coat. His expensive Italian suit was ruined, the fabric dark with rain clinging to a frame that looked smaller than I remembered. He was shivering, but I knew it wasn't just from the cold. It was the deep rattling shiver of a man who has looked into the abyss and seen it looking back. He stepped inside and closed the door. He looked around the small, dusty apartment. He saw the peeling paint. He saw the cheap furniture. This was the world I had risen from, the world he had always looked down upon, and now it was the only shelter he had left. "Dad," he whispered. The word cracked in his throat. I turned my chair slowly to face him. I didn't offer him a towel. I didn't offer him a seat. I just looked at him with the same impassive stare I used to give drivers who tried to explain why they were late with a shipment. "You look terrible, Andre," I said. He crumbled. It wasn't a slow descent. His legs just gave out. He fell to his knees on the hardwood floor, the wet fabric of his trousers slapping against the wood. He put his hands on the floor and bowed his head, his shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded like they were tearing his chest apart. "I am sorry," he choked out. "I am so sorry, Dad. I was stupid. I was so stupid." I watched him. A part of me, the father who had held him when he was a baby, wanted to get up. That part wanted to lift him up, dry him off, and tell him it would be okay. But that father had died in a 6x8 cell. The man sitting in the chair knew that comfort now would only breed more weakness later. "Stupid is a mild word for it, son," I said, my voice flat. "You were malicious, you were greedy, and you were weak." I know, he sobbed, lifting his head. His face was a mess of tears and rain. "She played me, Dad. She played me like a fool. I thought she loved me. I thought we were building something. But she is a monster." I took a sip of my coffee. "I told you that 2 years ago, Andre. I told you that the night she threw herself down the stairs. But you didn't listen to me then. You listened to the tears of a liar. She has the books, Dad." Andre blurted out, the confession finally bursting out of him like pus from a wound. "She has the tax records. I stole from the company. While you were away, I skimmed cash. I didn't declare it. I hid it to buy her things, to pay for her lifestyle. She threatened to go to the FBI. She said she would trade me for immunity. I am going to prison, Dad. I am going to prison for tax evasion and embezzlement." He crawled forward a few inches, reaching a hand out toward me, but not daring to touch my shoe. "Please help me. I don't know what to do. I can't go to jail. I won't survive in there. You are the only one who can fix this. You built the company. You know the accounts. Please, Dad, I will do anything. I will work for free. I will sweep the floors. Just save me." I looked at my son, reduced to a beggar in a room that cost less per month than the shoes he was wearing. This was the payoff. This was the moment I had engineered. But it didn't taste sweet. It tasted like ash. I set my coffee cup down on the table with a deliberate clink. "Get up, Andre," I commanded. He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I can save you," I said. Hope flared in his eyes, bright and desperate. I can paying off the IRS is just money," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I have money. I can hire the forensic accountants to restructure the books. I can frame the missing funds as a bad loan or an administrative error. I can pay the penalties. I can make the embezzlement disappear before the feds even open a file. I can keep you out of handcuffs." "Oh, thank God." Andre breathed, his knees buckling again with relief. "Thank you, Dad. I promise I will never—" I held up a hand to stop him. "I didn't say I would do it for free, Andre." He froze. The relief evaporated, replaced by a new kind of fear. He knew me. He knew that Raymond Bishop didn't give handouts to people who betrayed him. What do you want?" he asked. I stood up and walked over to him. I was an old man, but in that moment I felt 10 feet tall. I looked down into his eyes, searching for any scrap of the boy I had raised. "I want the truth," I said, "but not here. Not in this room. We're in court," I said. Andre recoiled. "I am reopening the case, Andre. I am suing Amber for defamation, malicious prosecution, and fraud regarding the incident 2 years ago. I am going to prove that she faked that fall. I am going to prove she faked that pregnancy, and I am going to clear my name." I stepped closer, invading his space. But to do that, I need a witness. I need someone who was there, someone who lied on the stand the first time. Andre shook his head, his eyes widening in panic. "Dad, if I admit I lied in court, that is perjury. I could go to jail for that." I shook my head. Tobias has already cut a deal with the district attorney. If you come forward voluntarily, if you recant your testimony and provide evidence of Amber's coercion, they will grant you immunity from the perjury charges. They want her, Andre. They want the mastermind. You are just the pawn. I placed a hand on his shoulder. It was heavy, a weight he couldn't shrug off. Here is the deal, son. It is binary. Option A, you protect her. You stay silent. The IRS audits the company next week because I will trigger it. They find the embezzlement. Amber hands over the evidence to save herself. You go to federal prison for 10 years for tax evasion. I let that sink in. 10 years. Option B, I continued. You walk into that courtroom next week. You sit in that chair, and you point the finger at the woman who destroyed this family. You tell the world that she faked it. You tell the world that I never touched her. You give me back my reputation. Andre looked away, his face twisting in agony. She is my wife, Dad, he whispered. Even after everything, she is my wife. She isn't your wife, Andre, I said brutally. She is a parasite that attached herself to a host. She bled you dry. She made you a criminal. And last night in that motel room, she threatened to send you to prison to save her own skin. Is that a wife, or is that an enemy? He didn't answer. He was weeping again. Silent tears that tracked through the grime on his face. He was fighting a war inside himself. The blind, stupid love he still held for her was wrestling with the primal instinct to survive. I walked back to the table and picked up a file. I tossed it to him. He caught it against his chest. Open it. He opened the file. It was the same medical report I had sent him anonymously. The proof that there was no baby. You read it yesterday, I said. But did you really understand it? She let you cry over a grave that didn't exist. She let you pick out names. She let you paint a nursery. All while she was laughing at you behind your back. Andre stared at the paper, his hands balled into fists, crinkling the document. The anger was rising, cutting through the fear. She made me choose, he whispered. That night on the stairs, she looked at me and made me choose between you and her, and you chose wrong, I said. Now I am giving you a chance to choose again. I looked at the clock. You have 1 hour, Andre. Tobias is waiting at his office to prep the affidavit. If you are not there by 9:30, I call the IRS. Andre looked at me. He looked at the door. He looked at the medical file in his hand. He took a deep, shuddering breath. The boy in him was dying finally. The man, a broken, scarred man, but a man nonetheless, was trying to stand up. She will hate me, he said. Good, I replied. Let her hate you. Hatred is better than indifference, which is all she has ever felt for you. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He straightened his jacket, though it was beyond saving. He looked at me, and for the first time in 2 years, he didn't look like a stranger. He looked like a bishop. I will do it, he said. I will testify. I nodded. I didn't smile. I didn't hug him. We were far past that. Then go, I said. Tobias is waiting. Andre turned to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Dad, yeah, will you ever forgive me? I looked at him standing in the doorway of the ruin he had helped create. Get on the stand, Andre. Tell the truth. Then we will talk about forgiveness. He nodded and walked out into the rain. I watched him go. I had saved him from prison, yes, but I had forced him to do something much harder. I had forced him to kill the thing he loved to save the thing he was. I sat back down and finished my coffee. It was cold now. The bitterness lingered on my tongue. I had won this round. I had turned her weapon against her. But the victory felt heavy. I was about to watch my son destroy his wife in open court. It was necessary. It was justice. But God help me, it was a tragedy. I pulled out my phone and dialed Tobias. He is coming, I said. Good, Tobias replied. Is he ready? He is ready to burn it down, I said. I hung up. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. But some stains I knew would never wash out. They had to be cut out. And next week in a courtroom downtown, I was going to hold the knife. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, a scent that usually signaled the orderly administration of justice, but today it smelled like a battlefield. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Tobias, my back straight, my hands clasped on the polished oak. I wore my best suit, the one I had worn to bury my wife Beatrice. It was fitting. Today, I was burying something else. I was burying the lie that had stolen 2 years of my life. Across the aisle, Amber sat with her defense team. She had dressed for the part of the innocent victim perfectly. She wore a modest, cream-colored dress, her hair pulled back in a soft, non-threatening bun. She wore no jewelry, a calculated move to garner sympathy from the jury. When she looked at me, her eyes were wide and fearful, playing to the gallery. But when she turned her gaze toward the back of the room where Andre was waiting, her expression shifted. It became sharp, predatory. A silent reminder of the secrets she held over his head. She thought she had him checkmated. She thought the threat of the tax evasion charges kept him on a leash. She didn't know that the leash had been cut. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, banged the gavel. The sound cracked through the room, silencing the murmurs of the press gallery. My story had caught fire. The live stream, the scandal, the fall of a social media star, it was all fodder for the hungry beast of public opinion. They were here to see the finale. "Mr. Moore, call your next witness," the judge said. Tobias stood up. He buttoned his jacket slowly, letting the tension build. He looked at Amber, then at the jury, and finally toward the heavy double doors at the back of the room. The plaintiff calls Andre Bishop to the stand. A ripple of shock went through the room. It was unheard of. A son testifying against his wife in a lawsuit brought by his father. It was Shakespearean. Amber didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled, a small, confident curling of her lips. She turned in her chair to watch him walk in. Her eyes locked onto his, broadcasting a clear message. Remember the ledger, remember the IRS, remember who owns you. Andre walked down the center aisle. He looked thin. His suit hung loosely on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. He didn't look at the jury. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the witness stand as if it were a life raft in a storm. He passed Amber's table. She leaned forward slightly, whispering something that only he could hear. I saw him stumble just for a fraction of a second before he straightened his back and kept walking. He climbed the steps to the stand. He placed his hand on the Bible. He swore to tell the truth. The truth. It was a concept he had been a stranger to for a long time. Tobias approached the stand. He didn't use notes. He knew exactly where the bodies were buried. Mr. Bishop, Tobias began, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You are the son of the plaintiff, Raymond Bishop, and the husband of the defendant, Amber Bishop. Is that correct?" "It is," Andre said. His voice was hoarse. He cleared his throat and repeated it louder this time. "It is. Let us go back to the night of November 12th, 2021, Tobias said. The night your wife allegedly fell down the stairs at your father's estate. The night you testified in criminal court that you saw your father push her." I watched Amber. She was relaxed. She was expecting him to plead the fifth. She was expecting him to say he didn't remember. She was expecting him to protect her, to save himself. "Do you recall that night?" Mr. Bishop, Tobias asked. "I do," Andre said. "Did you see your father push your wife down the stairs?" The courtroom held its breath. The air conditioners hummed. A reporter's pen scratched loudly on a notepad. Andre looked up. For the first time, he looked directly at Amber. His eyes weren't fearful anymore. They were dead. They were the eyes of a man who had already lost everything and realized he had nothing left to fear. "No," Andre said clearly. "I did not." Amber's smile froze. Her hand twitched on the table. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering frantically, but she ignored him. She stared at Andre, her eyes widening in disbelief. Tobias nodded, his face impassive. "You testified under oath 2 years ago that you did. Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" "I was lying then," Andre said. "My father never touched her. She threw herself. She waited until the door opened, until she knew I was watching, and she threw herself backward." "Objection!" Amber's lawyer shouted, jumping to his feet, badgering the witness. "This is perjury overruled," the judge said, leaning forward. "The witness will answer." Tobias continued, cutting through the noise. "Why, Mr. Bishop? Why would you send your own father to prison for a crime he didn't commit? Why would your wife stage such a horrific accident?" Andre took a deep breath. He gripped the railing of the witness stand until his knuckles turned white. "Because of the baby," he said. "Because of the miscarriage?" Tobias asked. "Because she lost the child." "No," Andre said. And then he dropped the bomb. "Because there never was a baby." The gasp from the gallery was audible. It was a physical wave of sound. Amber stood up, knocking her chair back. "He is lying," she screamed, her composure shattering like glass. "He is crazy." "I was pregnant. You all saw me. Sit down, Mrs. Bishop," the judge barked, banging the gavel. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Amber sat, but she was shaking. Her face was red, her eyes wild. She looked at Andre with a hatred so pure it felt like heat radiating across the room. Tobias waited for the silence to return. He walked back to our table and picked up the medical file, the same file I had sent to Andre in the motel room. "Mr. Bishop," Tobias said, handing him the file. "Do you recognize this document?" "Yes," Andre said. "It is a medical report from St. Mary's Hospital, dated 2 weeks prior to the incident. Please read the highlighted section for the jury." Andre held the paper. His hands were steady now. The truth had given him an anchor. "Patient presented with abdominal pain," he read. "Ultrasound confirms empty uterus. No fetal heartbeat. Spontaneous abortion complete." He looked up at the jury. "She lost the baby weeks before that night. Or maybe she never was pregnant. I don't know anymore. But that night, the night she fell, she wasn't carrying my child. She was wearing padding. She used stage blood." He turned to look at Amber. "She bought a nurse," he said, his voice rising with emotion. "She paid a nurse $5,000 to fake the records that night. She played me, she played the court, she played everyone." "Why?" Tobias asked softly. "Why go to such lengths?" "Because we wanted the money," Andre confessed. The words tumbled out of him now, a confession that had been rotting inside him for years. "We were broke. I had gambling debts. She had credit card debt. We knew my father had assets. We knew he wouldn't give us control while he was around. We needed him gone. We needed him incapacitated." He looked at me then. His eyes were wet, filled with a profound, crushing shame. "She told me if I helped her frame him, we would have the power of attorney. We could sell the assets. We could live the life we deserved. She said he was old. She said he wouldn't survive prison anyway. So I did it. I chose the money over my father." The courtroom was in chaos. The judge was banging the gavel, but nobody was listening. The reporters were typing furiously on their phones. Amber was sobbing, but nobody was looking at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her like she was a monster. "She coerced me," Andre shouted over the noise. "Even yesterday, she threatened me. She said she would turn me in for tax evasion if I didn't come here and lie again. She didn't care about me. She never loved me. She just wanted the check." That was it. The final nail. He had admitted to his own crimes to expose hers. He had blown up his own life to save what was left of his soul. "No further questions," Tobias said, sitting down. Amber's lawyer didn't even stand up to cross-examine. He knew it was over. He looked at his client with disgust, gathering his papers. He was already planning his resignation from the case. As Andre stepped down from the witness stand, he had to walk past me to get to the exit. The bailiffs were waiting for him. By admitting to perjury and fraud on the stand, he had essentially arrested himself. He was going to jail. He knew it. I knew it. He stopped in front of our table. He looked small, defeated, but clean. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. I looked at him. I didn't smile. There was no joy in this victory. A father doesn't rejoice when his son falls on his sword, even if it is necessary. I saw the ruin of the potential I had nurtured. I saw the waste of the education I had paid for. But I also saw something else. I saw a man who had finally stopped running. I looked him in the eye. I didn't offer forgiveness. That was for God. But I offered acknowledgement. I nodded. Just once. A short, sharp dip of my chin. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a warm embrace. But for Andre, it was enough. He closed his eyes, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 2 years, and let the bailiffs lead him away. I turned my gaze to Amber. She was alone at her table. Her lawyer had moved his chair away from her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with venom and fear. She mouthed a word at me. "Bastard." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The judge was already reading the charges into the record. Perjury, fraud, malicious prosecution. The district attorney was in the back of the room taking notes. Amber wasn't walking out of here. She was going to a cell just like the one she had sent me to. But as the bailiffs approached her, I saw her reach into her purse. She pulled out a folder. It wasn't a legal document. It looked old, weathered. She stood up, shaking off the bailiff's hand. "Wait!" she screamed. "You think you have won? You think you are a Saint Raymond Bishop?" She held up the folder. "I have proof," she yelled, turning to the cameras. "He isn't just a victim. He is a criminal. I have the shipping manifests. I know about the smuggling." I frowned. Smuggling? I ran a clean business. I had never moved a single ounce of contraband in 40 years. The judge ordered her to be silent, but Amber threw the folder onto the evidence table. "Look at it!" she shrieked as they handcuffed her. "He used his trucks to move illegal electronics." Andre told me Andre did it for him. My heart stopped, not because I was guilty, but because I realized what she had just done. She didn't have evidence against me. She had evidence against Andre. In her desperation to hurt me, she had just handed the authorities the proof of the smuggling operation Andre had run behind my back while I was in prison. She thought she was sinking me. She didn't realize I had been out of the game. She was sinking her husband. She was ensuring that his sentence wouldn't just be for perjury. It would be for federal trafficking. I watched as they dragged her out, kicking and screaming. She thought she had played a trump card. Instead, she had just locked the door to my son's cell and thrown away the key. The courtroom cleared out slowly. Tobias packed up his briefcase. She didn't know, Tobias said quietly. She didn't know you weren't involved. No, I said, looking at the door where my son had vanished. She just wanted to burn everything down. And she succeeded. I stood up. My name was clear. My reputation was restored. But the cost was my only son. Let's go, Tobias, I said. I have a business to rebuild, and I have a grandson to raise. We walked out into the hallway. The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted questions, but I didn't hear them. I was thinking about the empty seat at the dinner table. Justice had been served. It was cold. It was bitter. And it was exactly what I had ordered. The echo of Amber's scream seemed to hang in the courtroom air long after the heavy oak doors slammed shut behind her. She had thrown a grenade into the room, hoping to blow me to pieces. She accused me of smuggling. She claimed my trucking empire was built on the transport of illegal contraband. She thought she was playing the ultimate trump card, the secret that would send me back to prison for the rest of my life and leave the company in ruins, perhaps allowing her to snatch some piece of the wreckage. But Amber made a critical miscalculation. She assumed that because her husband was a criminal, I must be one too. She assumed that because Andre lacked a moral compass, he had inherited that deficiency from me. She didn't know that I had cleaned up my business 30 years ago. I had scrubbed every truck, every warehouse, and every ledger clean before Andre was even out of elementary school. I knew the risks of driving dirty, and I had built a legitimate empire so my son would never have to look over his shoulder. I stood in the hallway of the courthouse watching the reporters scatter to file their stories. Tobias stood next to me, his face grim. She just gave the feds probable cause, Ray Tobias said quietly. They are obligated to investigate. They are going to hit the warehouse. Let them, I said, buttoning my jacket. I have nothing to hide. My inventory is clean. My logs are perfect. Let them tear the place apart. It will just be one more nail in her coffin when they find nothing. We walked out to the car. I told Jenkins to drive us to the main distribution center. I wanted to be there when they arrived. I wanted to open the doors for them. I wanted to show the world that Raymond Bishop had nothing to fear from the truth. By the time we arrived at the sprawling warehouse complex on the edge of the city, the flashing lights were already visible from the highway. Black SUVs blocked the loading docks. Agents in windbreakers with those 3 terrifying letters FBI were swarming the facility. They were moving with the precision of a military unit, securing the perimeter, corralling the few remaining employees, and cutting the locks on the bay doors. I stepped out of the taxi. An agent stepped forward to block my path, his hand resting on his holster. "Step back, sir. This is a crime scene. I am Raymond Bishop," I said, my voice steady. "I own this building. Or rather, the trust I manage owns it. I am here to cooperate." A taller man with graying hair and a weary face walked over. I recognized him. Agent Miller. He had investigated my company 20 years ago during a sweeping audit of the logistics industry. He had found nothing then, and I expected him to find nothing now. Mr. Bishop, Miller said, not offering his hand. "Your daughter-in-law made some serious allegations in open court. She claims this facility is a hub for moving high-end contraband electronics and untaxed luxury goods." I looked at the warehouse behind him. "She is a desperate woman, Agent Miller. She just lost a lawsuit. She is facing prison time for fraud. She would say anything to hurt me." Miller nodded. "We figured as much. But an accusation like that on public record. We have to look. Look all you want," I said, gesturing to the open bay doors. "Open every crate. Check every manifest. You will find auto parts, textiles, and dry goods. That is what Bishop Logistics moves." Miller signaled to his team. "Start opening the containers in Bay 4. That is where she said the shipment was." I stood there with Tobias, my arms crossed, feeling a strange sense of calm. I knew what was in Bay 4. It was a shipment of ceramic tiles destined for a home improvement chain. I had signed the contract myself 3 years ago before I went away. I watched as the agents used crowbars to pry open the wooden crates. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the cavernous space. The first crate popped open. The agent reached in. He pulled out a box. But it wasn't ceramic tiles. It was a sleek black box with silver lettering. A high-end gaming console. The kind that had been sold out in stores for months. The kind that went for triple the price on the black market. I frowned. That must be a mistake. A mixed shipment. The agent opened another box. And another. Tablets. Smartwatches. Designer handbags wrapped in plastic. None of it was on the manifest. None of it was legal. Miller walked over to the crate. He picked up a manifest attached to the side. He read it, then looked at me. Ceramic tiles. Mr. Bishop. I felt a cold pit open in my stomach. I walked over. I looked at the crate. I looked at the shipping label. The date on the label was 6 months ago. I was in prison 6 months ago, I said, my voice tight. Miller looked at the date. He nodded. You were. He turned the manifest over. At the bottom there was a signature authorizing the intake of the shipment. A signature authorizing the off-the-book storage. It wasn't my signature. It was Andre's. I stared at the scrawled ink. It was sloppy, hurried, arrogant. My son, my foolish, greedy son. While I was sitting in a cell paying for a crime I didn't commit, he wasn't just mismanaging the company. He was using my trucks, my reputation, and my infrastructure to run a smuggling ring. He was moving stolen goods. He was laundering money through the very business I had built to keep him safe. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Amber hadn't implicated me. She had implicated Andre. In her blind rage, in her desire to burn me down, she had forgotten one crucial detail. I hadn't been running the company for 2 years. Andre had. She had just handed the FBI the evidence they needed to put her husband away for federal trafficking. Tobias leaned in close to me. Ray, look at the dates. Look at the volume. This isn't just a few boxes. This is millions of dollars in contraband. This is a federal RICO case. I looked at Miller. He wasn't looking at me with suspicion anymore. He was looking at the signature. This is your son's signature, Miller said. Yes, I whispered. Is he in custody? He is being held at the county jail, Tobias answered. For perjury. Miller pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Miller. I need a federal detainer placed on Andre Bishop at county. Do not release him on bail. We are upgrading charges to interstate trafficking and smuggling. I walked away from the crate. I felt dizzy. I walked out of the warehouse into the fresh air, but I couldn't breathe. Andre didn't just steal from me. He turned my legacy into a criminal enterprise. He risked everything, the drivers, the staff, the name on the side of the trucks, for quick cash to buy Amber jewelry she didn't appreciate. And Amber. She had just hammered the final nail into his coffin. I imagined the scene playing out at the county jail. Andre sitting in a holding cell, terrified, waiting for his lawyer to arrange bail for the perjury charge. He probably thought he could still wiggle out of it. He probably thought he could cut a deal, maybe get probation. Then the door would open. Not his lawyer. 2 federal agents. They would slap a new set of cuffs on him. They would tell him what they found in Bay 4. They would tell him that his wife, the woman he lied for, the woman he destroyed his family for, was the one who tipped them off. He would realize then, in the cold light of the interrogation room, that the woman he loved was the architect of his absolute destruction. She tried to kill his father, and when that failed, she killed him. I leaned against the wall of the warehouse. The sirens were still flashing, painting the concrete in shades of red and blue. It is over, Tobias said softly, standing beside me. They are both gone. Yes, I said. Amber thought she was playing 4D chess. She thought she had an ace up her sleeve, but she didn't understand the game. She didn't understand that when you throw mud, you lose ground. She tried to bury me, but she only succeeded in burying the man who was stupid enough to love her. I took out my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to a lawyer, not to the bank. To the orphanage where I grew up. I am going to sell it, I said to Tobias. Sell what? The company. The warehouse. The trucks. All of it. But Ray, that is your life. No, I said, watching the agents carry out boxes of evidence that bore my name. That was my past. My life is waiting for me at a school gate in the South Side. I didn't want the taint of this place anymore. I didn't want the money that came from this poisoned ground. I would sell the assets, pay off the debts Andre had incurred, and put the rest into a trust for Malik. I walked toward the taxi. Let's go, Jenkins. Where to, boss? To the jail, I said. I need to look my son in the eye one last time. I needed to see him. I needed to see if he understood. I needed to see if he finally realized that the woman he sacrificed everything for was the one who tightened the noose around his neck. Amber had fired the gun, but Andre had loaded the bullets, and now they were both going to bleed out. The phone rang at 3 in the morning. It was a sound that pierced the quiet darkness of my apartment on 43rd Street, a shrill mechanical scream that demanded attention. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. There is only one kind of call that comes at that hour, the kind that comes from a cage. I picked up the receiver. A robotic voice informed me that I was receiving a collect call from the Cook County Correctional Facility. I pressed the button to accept. I didn't say hello, I just listened. Pop, please. Andre's voice was a jagged shard of panic, cracking and breaking with every syllable. You have to help me. It was her. It was all Amber. She set me up, Dad. She planted that stuff in the warehouse. I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs creaking softly. I looked at the rain streaking the window pane, illuminated by the streetlights below. She didn't plant your signature on the manifests, Andre. I said, my voice thick with sleep but steady as a rock. No, you don't understand, he babbled, talking a mile a minute. I just signed what she put in front of me. I didn't know it was contraband. I thought it was just off-book freight. I was trying to save the company. I was trying to make money for us. Dad, you know people. You know the judges. You know the federal prosecutors from back in the day. Make a call. Pull a string, please. They are talking about 20 years, Dad. 20 years. I closed my eyes. 20 years. It was a lifetime. It was the rest of his youth, his middle age, his potential. It was the end of the line. I will be there in the morning, I said. Thank you. Oh God, thank you, he sobbed. I knew you wouldn't leave me. I knew you would fix it. I hung up the phone. He didn't understand. I wasn't going there to fix it. I wasn't going there to call in a favor. I was going there to do the one thing a father fears most. I was going there to bury my son. Not in the ground, but in the consequences of his own choices. The next morning, the sky was the color of a bruised plum. I dressed slowly. I chose a dark suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie that Beatrice had given me 30 years ago. It was a tie for serious business. A tie for funerals. Jenkins drove me to the jail in silence. He knew where we were going. He knew why. He didn't offer platitudes. He just drove. The jail was a fortress of concrete and misery. I knew the smell of it intimately. Industrial cleaner sweat and fear. I knew the sound of the heavy steel doors slamming shut, a sound that vibrates in your teeth. I walked through the security checkpoint, emptied my pockets, and walked through the metal detector. 2 years ago, I had walked in here as an inmate, stripping my dignity away, layer by layer. Today I walked in as a visitor, but the weight on my chest felt heavier than any shackle. I sat in the visitation booth. It was a small cubicle with a thick plexiglass window dividing two worlds. On my side, freedom. On his side, hell. Andre was brought in a few minutes later. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too big for him. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He looked like a ghost. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken and wild. He sat down and snatched the phone receiver from the wall, pressing it to his ear with desperate urgency. Dad, he said, his breath fogging the glass. Did you call them? Did you talk to Tobias? We need to get bail. They denied bail, Dad. They said I am a flight risk. You have to put up the deed to the building. You have to get me out. I picked up the phone slowly. I looked at him. I looked at the child I had bounced on my knee. I looked at the boy I had taught to ride a bike. I looked at the man who had sold my trucks and bought a Bentley while I sat in a cell. I didn't call anyone, Andre, I said. He froze. The panic in his eyes turned into confusion. What? But you said you were coming. I came to see you, I said. I came to look you in the eye. He shook his head, a frantic, jerky motion. No, don't do this. You have money now. You have the secret accounts. You can hire the best defense team in the country. You can bribe someone. I don't care what it takes. Just get me out of here. I can't stay here, Dad. The other guys, they know who I am. They know I am soft. They are going to eat me alive. I leaned forward, my forehead almost touching the cold glass. You aren't soft, Andre, I said. Soft men don't sell their father's legacy. Soft men don't smuggle millions of dollars in electronics through a legitimate business. That takes a special kind of hardness, a special kind of arrogance. It wasn't me, he screamed, slamming his fist against the glass. The guard behind him took a step forward, his hand resting on his baton. It was Amber. She needed the money. She pushed me to do it. I watched him unravel. It was always someone else's fault. It was Amber. It was me. It was the market. It was never Andre. You signed the papers, I said quietly. You coordinated the shipments. I saw the logs, son. I saw the emails. You weren't a victim. You were the boss. You liked the thrill. You liked playing gangster while I was locked away. You thought you were smarter than the system. You didn't think I interrupted him. That has always been your problem. You never thought about the cost. You only thought about the prize. I took a deep breath. The air in the booth was stale, recycled 1,000 times. 2 years ago, I said, my voice low and steady. I sat in a courtroom just like the one you will be in next week. I stood in front of a judge and I pleaded guilty to a crime I didn't commit. Andre looked down, unable to hold my gaze. I did it for you, I continued. I did it because I thought you were young. I thought you were in love. I thought that if I took the hit, if I sacrificed my freedom, you would step up. I thought you would run the company. I thought you would take care of the house. I thought you would grow into the man I knew you could be. I paused, waiting for him to look at me. When he finally did, his eyes were filled with tears. I gave you 2 years, Andre. 2 years of my life. 730 days. Do you know what it is like in here? Do you know what it is like to wake up every day staring at a cinder block wall, wondering if your son is okay? I am sorry, he whispered. Sorry doesn't fix it, I said. I gave you time to mature, time to build. But you didn't build Andre. You destroyed. You took the legacy your mother and I built with our blood and sweat and you treated it like a casino. You sold the trucks, you leveraged the house, and then when that wasn't enough, you turned my warehouses into a smuggling den. I leaned back, the plastic chair digging into my spine. You spit on my sacrifice, Andre. You spit on your mother's memory. And you did it all for a woman who turned around and handed you to the feds the moment things got tough. Dad, please, he begged, the tears flowing freely now. I learned my lesson, I swear. I learned it. Just give me one more chance, one more. I will do anything. I will go away. I will disappear. Just don't let me rot in here. I looked at him. I searched my heart for that spark of paternal instinct, that urge to protect your child no matter what. I looked for it, but I couldn't find it. It had been extinguished by the cold reality of his betrayal. I can't save you, Andre, I said, not because I don't have the money, but because if I save you now, I am robbing you of the only thing that can actually help you. What are you talking about? Consequences, I said. He stared at me, his mouth open. You have never paid a bill in your life that I didn't cover, I said. You have never made a mistake that I didn't fix. You have never faced a consequence that I didn't shield you from. And look at you. You are 35 years old, and you are a child, a dangerous, destructive child. I stood up. The movement felt final. This time I said, my voice hard as iron, you have to pay the tab. You have to sit in that cell. You have to face the judge, and you have to do the time. No! Andre screamed, standing up, rattling the handcuffs against the ledge. You can't leave me. You are my father. You are supposed to protect me. I did protect you, I said. I protected you from the world for 35 years, and all it did was make you weak. Now I am protecting the world from you. I started to turn away. Dad, wait. Don't go. I will die in here. I paused. I looked back at him one last time. He was pressed against the glass, his face distorted by the pressure, his breath fogging the barrier between us. He looked like a drowning man. You won't die. Andre, I said. You will live. And for the first time in your life, you will live a life that is entirely your own. You wanted to be the boss. You wanted to make the big decisions. Well, congratulations. You made them. Now own them. I hung up the phone. The connection cut instantly. The sound of his voice, the sound of his begging vanished from my ear. But I could still hear him. I could hear him screaming through the glass, a muffled, animalistic sound of pure terror. Dad, come back. Dad. I didn't look back again. I turned and walked toward the heavy steel door. My heart felt like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold. It is a terrible thing to walk away from your own child. It goes against nature. It goes against every instinct in your blood. But as I pushed open the door and stepped out into the hallway, I felt something else, too. I felt a strange, painful clarity. I had spent my life building a business, but I had failed to build a man. I had given him everything except the one thing he needed most, the struggle. I walked past the guards, past the other visitors, past the weeping mothers and the angry wives. I walked out into the gray morning light. Jenkins was waiting by the curb, his car idling. He looked at my face and didn't ask how it went. He knew. "Ready to go, Ray?" "Yes," I said, getting into the car. "Where to?" "Take me to the lake," I said. "I need to breathe." As the car pulled away, the jail receded in the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was just a gray block in the distance. My son was inside that block. He would be there for a long time, 10 years, maybe 15. I closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I had done what had to be done. I had cut the rot out of the family tree. Now all that was left was to see if the roots could still hold. Amber had fired the gun. Andre had loaded the bullets. And I had finally stopped standing in front of the target. The gavel fell with a sound like a guillotine blade slicing through the humid air of the courtroom and severing the last threads of the life Amber Bishop had constructed. I sat in the back row, a silent observer to the funeral of a socialite. Amber stood at the defense table, but she was no longer the woman who had sneered at me in my own home. She was trembling, her knuckles white, as she gripped the edge of the table, her face stripped of makeup, revealing the raw, terrified skin underneath. The judge, a man with a face carved from granite, who had no patience for influencers or liars, looked down at her over his spectacles. He didn't see a victim. He didn't see a grieving mother. He saw a predator who had used the judicial system as a weapon. "Amber Bishop," he said, his voice filling the room. "You have been found guilty of 3 counts of perjury, 2 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of malicious prosecution. You manipulated the emotions of a family, the resources of this court, and the goodwill of the public for your own financial gain." Amber let out a sob, a jagged, ugly sound. She looked back at the gallery, searching for a friendly face, for a fan, for anyone. But the benches were filled with the people she had scammed, the former friends she had betrayed, and the reporters who were writing the obituary of her reputation. "There is no camera filter for this," I thought. "I sentence you to 8 years in state prison," the judge declared, followed by 5 years of probation. "You are also ordered to pay restitution to the Beatrice Bishop Scholarship Fund in the amount of $400,000. 8 years. She screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a primal shriek of denial. Her knees gave out and she collapsed into the arms of the bailiff. As they dragged her away, her heels scraping against the floor, she locked eyes with me. "You did this," she wailed. "You ruined me." I didn't blink. I didn't look away. "No, Amber," I whispered to the empty space between us. "You did this the moment you thought you could outsmart the truth." The doors slammed shut behind her. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was clean. Outside the courthouse, the media circus was in full swing. The headlines were already written. Influencer exposed, the fake pregnancy that led to prison. Her sponsors had issued statements condemning her. Her followers had turned into a mob dissecting her old videos for more lies. She was not just going to prison, she was going to oblivion. She was a pariah, a cautionary tale that would be forgotten before her first parole hearing. But my work wasn't done. The state court was just the appetizer. The main course was being served across the street at the federal courthouse. 2 days later, I sat in a different room under the cold fluorescent lights of federal justice. This room was quieter. There were no cameras here. The feds don't like a spectacle. They just like results. Andre sat at the defendant's table. He looked small in the orange jumpsuit of the county jail. He had been transferred into federal custody immediately after the raid on the warehouse. His hair was shaved close to his scalp, stripping away the last vestiges of the corporate executive he had pretended to be. He looked like a frightened boy who had lost his way in the dark. He didn't look at me. He stared at his hands, which were clasped in front of him, shackled to his waist. The charges were read: interstate trafficking of contraband, tax evasion, Money laundering. The list was long, a receipt for 2 years of arrogance and stupidity. The federal prosecutor, a woman with eyes like steel, laid out the case. She talked about the millions of dollars in electronics. She talked about the falsified manifests. She talked about the signature, Andre's signature, that was on every single document. Andre's lawyer tried to argue for leniency. He talked about coercion. He talked about Amber's influence. He tried to paint Andre as a victim of love. But the judge wasn't buying it. Mr. Bishop, the judge, said, his voice echoing in the sterile room, "You were the CEO of a major logistics company. You had a fiduciary duty. You had a moral duty. Instead, you turned a legacy into a smuggling ring. You didn't just break the law. You broke the trust of every employee who worked for you." Andre stood up for sentencing. He was shaking. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I just wanted to save the company." "You didn't save it," the judge said. "You infected it." The sentence was handed down. 10 years in federal prison, no parole, mandatory minimums applied. 10 years. I watched my son's shoulders slump. It was the physical manifestation of a life collapsing. 10 years meant he would be 45 when he got out. He would miss his son's childhood. He would miss the prime of his life. He would emerge a middle-aged man with nothing to his name but a felony record. As the marshals moved to take him away, Andre turned his head. He found me in the back row. His eyes were wet, filled with a mixture of fear and regret that was painful to witness. "Dad," he mouthed. I looked at him. I saw the ghost of the little boy I used to take fishing on Lake Michigan. I saw the teenager I taught to drive. But those memories were overlaid with the image of the man who had lied in court to put me away. I nodded a slow, solemn acknowledgement. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. The debt had been paid. The balance was zero. He turned away and the door closed behind him. I was the last Bishop man left standing. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. Tobias was waiting for me on the steps. He handed me a cup of coffee. "It is done, Ray," Tobias said. "Yes," I said. "It is done." "So what now?" "Now," I said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee, "we clean up the mess." I spent the next month dismantling the empire I had spent 40 years building. It was a strange kind of grief signing the papers to sell Bishop Logistics. I sold the fleet to a competitor I had respected for years. I sold the warehouse distribution center to a national retailer. I liquidated the office equipment, the furniture, even the artwork on the walls. I didn't want the name Bishop on the side of a truck anymore. That name had been tarnished. It had been dragged through the mud of scandal and crime. I wanted to retire it with whatever dignity it had left. The sale generated millions. After paying off the debts Andre had accrued, after settling the fines with the IRS and the restitution to the victims of his smuggling ring, there was still a substantial fortune left. People asked me if I was going to buy a yacht. They asked if I was going to move to an island. They didn't understand. I didn't want the money. The money was the poison that had made my son sick. I sat in Tobias's office, the final check on the desk between us. "Draft the paperwork." "Tobias," I said. "For the new company." "No," I said. "For the Beatrice Bishop Education Initiative." I pushed the check across the desk. "All of it?" Tobias asked, his eyebrows raising. "All of it," I confirmed. "I want full-ride scholarships for kids from the South Side. Engineers, doctors, lawyers. I want to build a community center where they can learn to code, learn to build, learn to be something other than what the streets tell them to be." "And what about you?" Tobias asked. "I have my pension," I said. "I have the apartment. I have enough. But I did keep one thing. I kept a single portion of the sale, a trust fund, locked away in an account that no one could touch." I took a taxi to the duplex where Keisha lived. It was a Saturday. Malik was playing in the small patch of yard, kicking a soccer ball against the fence. He looked so much like Andre at that age, it made my heart ache. Keisha came out to the porch, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked tired, but she looked lighter. The lawsuit against Amber had been successful. She had recovered enough assets from the seizure of Amber's jewelry and car to pay off her debts and put a down payment on a decent house. "Ray," she said, smiling. "I have something for the boy," I said. I handed her a heavy envelope. Inside were the documents for the trust. It was enough to pay for college, for a first home, for a start in life that didn't require crime or deceit. "This is for Malik," I said. "He gets it when he is 25, not 18, 25, when he is a man, when he knows the value of $1. Keisha opened the envelope. She saw the numbers. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "Ray, you didn't have to. You sold the company." "The company was the past, Keisha," I said, looking at my grandson. "He is the future." I walked over to the fence. Malik stopped kicking the ball and looked at me. "Hey, Pop," he said. "Hey, son," I replied. "Are you staying?" he asked. "Mom said you were going away again." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt on my face in 2 years. "I am not going anywhere, Malik. I am right here." I wasn't the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation anymore. I wasn't a tycoon. I wasn't a power player. I was just a grandfather. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like the most important job in the world. Andre was in a cell learning the hard lessons I had tried to shield him from. Amber was in a cell learning that beauty and lies fade under fluorescent lights. But the Bishop legacy, it wasn't dead. It was just starting over. It was kicking a soccer ball against a fence in the south side of Chicago. And this time I was going to make sure we built it right. The sun had not yet broken the horizon over Lake Michigan. The water was a sheet of hammered steel gray and restless, lapping against the concrete pier with a rhythmic, hypnotic sound. It was cold, the kind of damp Chicago chill that settles deep in your bones, but for the first time in 2 years I didn't mind it. The cold felt real. It felt alive. I sat on a folding chair, a fishing rod in my hand, the line disappearing into the murky depths. Next to me, wrapped in a thick wool coat and a scarf that looked older than he was, sat Tobias. We hadn't spoken in an hour. We didn't need to. We were 2 old men who had just fought a war, and now we were watching the smoke clear. There was a thermos of coffee between us. Steam rose from the plastic cup in my hand, curling into the morning air. "It is quiet," Tobias said, finally, his voice rough with the morning air. "It is," I agreed. "Too quiet for you," he asked. "You are used to the noise, Ray. The trucks, the deals, the chaos of that house. Now it is just you." I looked out at the water. I thought about the mansion empty now, awaiting the new tenants who would turn it into a sanctuary for the broken. I thought about the office tower stripped of my name, sold to strangers. And I thought about the federal penitentiary 3 hours south of here where the lights were just coming on for the morning count. "I am not lonely, Tobias," I said, reeling in the line a few inches. "I am light." Tobias looked at me sideways. "Light." "For 35 years I carried a weight," I said. I carried the weight of a son I was trying to save from himself. I carried the weight of a legacy I was trying to force into hands that were too weak to hold it. I woke up every morning afraid he would fail, afraid he would get hurt, afraid he would destroy what I built. I took a sip of the coffee. I spent my life trying to pave the road for him so he wouldn't stumble. But I never realized that by paving the road, I was taking away his ability to walk. And now Tobias asked. "Now the road is broken," I said, "and he has to crawl. It breaks my heart, old friend. It breaks my heart to know he is in a cage. But it also gives me peace. Because I know that for the first time in his life, Andre is facing the world without a safety net. He is facing the man in the mirror. And whatever happens next, whether he rises or falls, it will finally be his own doing." The sun began to peek over the edge of the water, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. The city behind us was waking up. The rumble of traffic on Lakeshore Drive was starting to build. I looked at the empty space next to me. Beatrice should have been here. She should have been sitting in a chair complaining about the cold, telling me I wasn't going to catch anything. I missed her. I missed her with an ache that never truly went away. But as I looked at the sunrise, I felt a strange sense of communion with her. She would have hated what happened to Andre. She would have cried, but she would have understood. She knew better than anyone that you cannot save someone who is determined to drown. You can only let go of the rope before they pull you down with them. I reeled in the line. The hook was empty. The bait was gone. "Looks like they outsmarted you today." Ray Tobias chuckled. Maybe I smiled, or maybe I just wasn't trying to catch anything. Maybe I just wanted to sit here and feel the wind on my face without looking over my shoulder. I stood up and began to pack my gear. The tackle box clicked shut. The rod collapsed with a snap. Simple sounds. Honest sounds. Down the pier, a group of children ran toward the water's edge. They were bundled up in colorful jackets, shouting and laughing, chasing seagulls. They were loud and chaotic and full of energy. One of them, a little boy with a bright red hat, tripped over his own feet. He fell onto the concrete. He didn't cry immediately. He looked around. He looked for his mother. When he saw she was watching but not rushing to pick him up, he stood up on his own. He brushed off his knees. And then he started running again. I watched him, a genuine smile spreading across my face. It was the first time in years I had smiled without a shadow behind it. "That is how you learn," I whispered. "You fall. You get up. You run." I picked up my gear. "Where to now, Ray?" Tobias asked, standing up and dusting off his coat. "Back to the apartment." "No," I said. "I am going to the library. I promised Malik I would help him pick out books for his school project. And then I might look for a small house, something with a garden, something quiet. You are retiring, I am starting over." "Tobias, my life belongs to me now, not to the company, not to my son, to me. And I have a lot of living left to do." We walked off the pier together, two old soldiers leaving the battlefield. I didn't look back at the water. I didn't look back at the past. I walked into the city, into the noise and the life and the future. I was Raymond Bishop. I had lost a fortune, but I had regained my soul. And as the morning sun hit my face, I knew that was a trade I would make every single time. The hardest lesson for any parent is realizing that protecting your children from the consequences of their actions is not love, it is destruction. I spent my life building a shield around my son, thinking I was giving him the best. Instead, I created a man who believed he was entitled to everything without earning anything. By sending him to prison, I didn't abandon him. I finally let him meet the one teacher he had avoided all his life. Reality. True legacy isn't the money you leave behind, but the character you instill. Sometimes you have to let the tree break so the roots can finally find the ground. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much